Brandon, welcome. Good to hear you again.
It's a pleasure to have... Oh my gosh, I almost said it's a pleasure to have you back. You see, I've transitioned internally into thinking of, like, I am actually weirdly, like, taking over the podcast today because yes. I am going to get to interview you, Eneasz.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? Maybe you should do the intro since you are now the podcast person.
Oh, I wouldn't even know how to do it. I have, like, the theme music in my head right now, but I don't. Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I am your pirate host, Brandon Hendrickson, and today I have, with my co-host here, Stephen Zubner. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Brandon.
And today we are interviewing Eneasz Brodsky, who you may know from Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, and as the narrator and any number of short stories and novels that he has. And Eneasz, what else? One of my perpetual irritations, Eneasz, with your wonderful podcast, which I love, is that we don't get to know, like, the cool things that you and Stephen do outside of this. So what other things do you do in your life that are not mentioned every week in the podcast?
Well, I think we should be interviewing maybe Stephen as well, because he also has very interesting life things. What do I do outside of the podcast? Gosh, that's a good question. Less now than I used to. It is so weird. When I was like working the 9-to-5 accounting gig, I kept thinking, I'm going to have so much more time for writing and other stuff once I quit this. But as it turns out, except for like the third week of the month, like during the third week, I'm working a good 50, 55 hours, like at his crunch week during the accounting cycle, at least for my company. The rest of the time, I got maybe 10 to 15 hours of empty time any given week. This was like pre-COVID, so you had to be in the office. You had to be looking like you were busy, so sitting at your computer and like doing stuff on the keyboard. And so like I would surf less wrong. I would write up blog posts. I would, write up a few paragraphs in whatever the latest story I was working on was. And I kept thinking, once I don't have this over my head, I'm going to do so much more. But actually, being forced to go into a boring place and having nothing to do but pretending to look busy actually really supercharged a lot of my work. So I work actually about the same amount now. It's just far more relaxed.
And less accounting.
And less accounting, that's true. And which also means I don't get paid for fucking working on my podcast anymore.
Yeah, you're among the busiest people I know, like when it comes to extra work activities. So much so that it probably amounts to a good full-time job.
Yeah. So I guess now I only have one full-time job, and it makes me feel kind of lazy. But I write in my blog, I read for... Well, okay, just interesting to me. But because I'm like very interested in the rationalist stuff, I sometimes think it might be interesting to other rationalists, which is why I have the podcast. I write my blog, I write some short stories. I'm working on my second novel, working in quotes because I haven't actually written any words in it in the past 6 months. But I'll get back onto that. Aside from that, due to back injury in 2020, I now spend a fair amount of time every day on things like physical therapy, and I try to keep in shape. And nowadays I do a lot more travel and trying to get in touch with my inner self, which is, is very hippie and woo, but has been a major arc of the past 2 years of mine, and is motivating a lot of changes. So there we go. That is the other things I do in my spare time.
The big reason that I had originally wanted to come on this time was to ask you about, not just ask you about, really figure out, like, what is the story with you and religion? Yeah.
You said this was sparked by some comment on religion. Oh, it was the snake cult.
Oh, no, it was even before that, because it was when I was on the last time, which is right before the snake cult stuff. I like how out of context that sounds really weird, and in context, it's also really weird and is truly awesome. But you had mentioned that you had grown up JW, Jehovah's Witness.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. In the snake cult episode, that you have a major crush or something on Christian theology.
A Christian fetish.
I'll just go with the word crush. But you can put the words in that you want.
I like fetish. Fetish is fun. It even has a religious undertone to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, deep, anthropological level humanity stuff there. I thought, oh man, like, I know rationalists who are religious, right? Mormon or Lutheran or whatever. I know rationalists.
Oh, don't get me started.
Fair enough. Check.
Well, or you can get me started. Like part of my motivation for recent projects is that we've been losing a lot of not losing. A lot of rationalists have started picking up things like the traditional Catholicism, or Mormonism, or Buddhism, like just wandering off into religions. And I'm like, our core thing is rationalism. We reject all the stupid, crazy voodoo woo stuff because it's so fake. Like, why are we now dabbling with this and actually losing people to Mormonism? And it's because of all the other things religions offer. And that is why I think we need to look into that, so we don't keep losing people that need those things in their life.
It surprises me that you get adult converts to religion.
Yeah. Well, religions offer a lot.
I remembered, like, in high school, I met somebody who he professed that he was suddenly like a born-again Christian. And I was like, how do you come across that, like, in young adulthood? Be like, oh, I found this. It's true.
Yeah.
It usually goes the other way.
As a former born-again Christian, I can totally understand how somebody could fall into that. I was raised very evangelical and came out of that when I was in college. My goal was to become a theologian. And I just kept pressing to see, like, okay, like, what is the ground that we can find to demonstrate that Christianity is true? And kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing until I got to the spot where I had to painfully admit to myself that I don't think that there is any, and I'm not willing to keep going on pretending that I believe otherwise. So I sort of resigned my hat in Christianity with no job plan. Like, what does an out of work would-be theologian do?
How old were you at the time?
This is senior year of college, somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Around there.
So you were already, like, actually studying this as a vocation.
I mean, I'd gotten a free ride to a state school. So I was studying religious studies. So obviously, religious studies is much more lucrative than having a private Christian college theology degree. It is not. So I had this major kind of life, what the heck do I do with myself sort of thing. I defined myself as an atheist and been involved in atheist community, and I've currently defined myself as an agnostic, in large part because people just sometimes get very angry with me and decide to, like, work out all of their issues when I would say that I was an atheist.
You still get that?
I still got that sometimes, but now I've transitioned to saying that I'm an agnostic, which I think correctly communicates that I am very open-minded and, in fact, very much enjoy talking about theology and religion. Whereas the word atheist communicated, I hate you, and I think you're stupid.
I hate that, because that's not what it's supposed to mean. I think me and Steven talked about this too, but I think that's why we figured that Neil deGrasse Tyson says that he's an agnostic, because he is an atheist, but he just doesn't want to deal with all the social stuff, right?
Yeah, I think he says that the only ist he is a scientist.
There we go.
Yeah, for me, if someone pressed me, I'd say, yeah, atheist. But, like, because I'm agnostic in a way that sounds disingenuous if someone were to press me. I'm agnostic about whatever the Christian God in the same way that I am about unicorns.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that pejoratively, although it's, I think, impossible to interpret any other way. But, like, it's like, show me a unicorn and I'll believe you if I get to pet it and, whatever. Similar to God. If Jesus flew down and was demonstrating his magic powers on TV and whatever, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, this is true. So I think any atheist would say the same about that. But it's all of my main exposure to this and time spent in this was during the New Atheism Wars of the early 2000s. And back then, agnostic just meant, oh, you're just not picking a side, which was fine.
Yeah. It's entirely, like, just a vibes-based definition now. Like, agnostic and atheist mean the same thing in terms of what you believe, but one of them is viewed as aggressive and one isn't. The weird thing is that any rationalist is, by necessity, if they're an actual rationalist, an atheist, because at least in terms of the personalized being that exists outside of the laws of physics, because there is literally no proof of any such thing at all that is even slightly reasonable. So the fact that rationalists are being moved, some of them are moving over to religions despite knowing this and having internalized it means interesting things for what other stuff religions offer. And like the really crazy thing is after a few years in a religion, some of them will start to believe it, which is, I mean, that's just how strong the social instinct is in humans, right? It's crazy.
What's interesting is I would say that rationalists definitionally would be agnostic, just as they are about everything. You know, you can convince me that 2 + 2 is 3 is doable, but you know, it would take a lot of convincing.
I mean, definitionally, sure, but in practice, in the actual world that we live in, you'd have to be atheistic about any sort of person, you know, having personal agency type of deity.
Right. And nobody should accept, well, you know, God did it as a good explanation for anything.
Right.
And so to that extent, you know, it's not a belief that pays any rent, right?
Yeah. Even in cases where maybe God did do it, it's still not a good explanation.
I feel like I disagree hard with the specific claim that there are no, and maybe I'm actually getting this wrong, Eneasz, that there are no theistic rationalists. And
well, there are. They're just very wrong.
Well, wouldn't we say that that is also true on a whole host of different topics, that there are rationalists, I don't know, socialists or rationalists, whatever?
Yes, but the fact that there is no decent physical evidence at all makes a huge difference in a philosophy that is so centered on empiricism.
Well, I think that too. I mean, there's wrong and then there's like really wrong, you know,
right.
Or you know, I could see reasonable disagreement amongst rationalists about the nature of consciousness or many worlds' interpretation of quantum mechanics or something. But for them to be, for a rationalist to say, I believe that Jesus existed 2,000 years ago and he doesn't want us to masturbate, or I believe the world is flat, but, you know, I still am a rationalist because I read all these things, I do all the rest of the stuff. It'd be weird for them to put on the rationalist hat and then go to their flat earth conference, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's also both a materialistic and reductionist philosophy. Materialistic meaning that everything reduces down to physical material components, right? To start claiming, but there's some things that are immaterial and we can't prove them, but they're real anyway, it's a step outside of what is rational in terms of capital R rationalism.
I'm trying to channel my friends who are rationalist theists. And I think for them, and I'm not positive on this, but for them, I think that they tend to lean more deistic. And so what they would expect to see for actual empirical evidence is a lot less than somebody, you know, who thinks that it's God who makes the sun rise every morning or something like that. I'm thinking of, do you guys read Bentham's Bulldog? Scott actually referenced him recently, which is how I found him. But he writes a Substack.
I've read one or two of his things, but I don't read him regularly now.
I like him because he's much more utilitarian than I am, and I'm very utilitarian, and he's much more theistic than I am. And he just, I think yesterday, published a big post on like bringing together his multiple arguments for God. I skimmed it, and it's in my to-read list, and it's exactly the sort of super philosophical argument that I just have a hard time buying, right? Like, I don't want to really pin large pieces of my life or of my beliefs on abstruse philosophical arguments, but maybe that's a personal failing of mine.
I don't think that's a failing.
I think that the deistic lens of theology seemed like kind of like a placeholder for, well, we don't know what happened, so we'll just say God did it. And that gap has been solved over and over throughout history by something that we then understand. And I agree, the origin of the universe seems like a special case, whereas like why do things fall seems mundane compared to that.
I heard an argument against that recently, because that's exactly how I sort of see the history of science and religion. The argument that I read, I forget where, was somebody saying, actually it may have been Bentham's Bulldog, we say that that's what happened, but actually a lot of the God does this sort of answers actually came in the early modern period, specifically when science was beginning to encroach on was beginning to come up with specific explanations. You know, like where does life come from and all those sorts of things. Like the actual medieval and ancient world belief was not that God did it. It was that, like you frequently just have rocks turning into life, right? Like the seeds of life are just sort of pregnant in all of reality. We only started to bring the God of the gaps in a few hundred years ago.
Like, why do stars move? No one even bothers to think about it. They just move, right? And it's only once science starts saying everything must have an explanation, then people are like, oh, well, they move because God did it.
Yeah. Or Aristotle comes in and says everything, the natural state of everything is to be at rest. Okay, so then you need something really mighty to be moving these stars and the whole spheres and all of that.
I think the deistic sort of explanations, the term that rationalists use is they don't really pay rent. They're interesting to think about. We did a whole episode on cyber Christianity, which basically comes down to the simulation argument. And I am very much, I don't want to say convinced by the simulation argument, but I take it seriously. Like there is a distinct... Yeah, there's a distinct non-zero chance, in my opinion, that we're in a simulation. Therefore, miracles could be the dark lords of the Matrix intervening and changing a variable here and there, whatever. But the point is that belief doesn't pay any rent. It doesn't change how anything works, how anything is done. Like, there's literally nothing you can do with it. So it's not particularly worth spending a lot of time on. It's just like, oh, that'd be kind of neat, and continue to live your life as well as you can.
I mean, that seems very sensible to me. And now I need to apologize because this is my first time being a podcast host-ish, and I'm doing a bad job of it because I was not planning to talk about the whole, to rehash the atheist-theist wars at all. So let me tear us and go into, here's the two things that I want to do, Eneasz. I want to grill you about your Jehovah's Witness background because I don't have any friends who were Jehovah's Witnesses. I think I have like one of at least every other major world religion and Christian denomination, but not Jehovah's Witnesses. So I want to know about that. But then I got really excited when I was doing the preparation for this, when I found out that lately you have been talking about your interest in, I'm going to get this wrong, but like starting something that looks like starting a religion or drawing from religions to make a sort of subgroup inside of the rationalist community, or using the tools of religion to rejuvenate rationalist community or something like that. That's the second thing I want to do. And I want to push that off till second, because if I don't start with the Jehovah's Witness thing, we will never get to that. So without even allowing you a chance to reply, what should we do when Jehovah's Witnesses knock on our doors?
Just say, no thanks, I'm not interested.
What?
Then close the door. What? Why? What?
What are you? This is such like a human. This situation is so pregnant with human possibility, right? You have these people who are like at loggerheads on so very many things. Even like if the other set of them are like Orthodox Christians, right? And you have like one group of these people who are like literally going out of their way to have the potential for these sorts of conversations. I know it's not like deep conversations that is the goal here, but like they're putting themselves at the very least into the possibility space for that. Like, we must not waste these amazing chances. So in your experience, here, can you tell us a story? Because I assume that you did go door to door, right?
Yes.
What was it like?
Can I give a quick analogy, though, for why I defend that the answer Eneasz gave?
Oh, yeah.
Like, for whatever reason, I live in a place that the homes are at the oldest 2 years old, and we still get every other week someone coming to the door to try and sell us on, you need our exterminator services, you need our landscaping services, or whatever. And I always politely will let them talk for a moment, and then I'll say, hey, I appreciate it, but there's no way you're going to be able to sell me on this. Oh, well, you sure it's going to be a limited time deal? Like, no, I'm really sure. You know, if you leave me your website, I'll look into it, but that's all I can say. And so I imagine that inviting a Jehovah's Witness in is going to be much the same conversation. And I haven't talked to enough door-to-door proselytizers, but it's just going to be a lot like talking to a salesperson. And it's like, I know where this conversation's trying to go, and I am not interested. And I doubt you're going to make me interested. And so that's where I can kind of defend let's not waste either of our time. Go to a door where you might actually convert somebody.
From my vantage point, the difference there is that you're not likely to get into a deep conversation about human values and about epistemology with a vacuum cleaner salesman. At least with Mormons, I have had wonderful, they've come back many times, sort of conversations with Mormon missionaries about why is it that you believe the things that you believe? And man, why do I not believe those things? And what's the crux of it? Like what would it take for me to do that? What would it take for you to? Maybe the situation is that I'm going to put this in the worst possible way. It's not just an opportunity for them to convert you, it's an opportunity for you to convert them. And that's the worst possible way, because my goal in those situations is never to convert them. It is, however, to take the opportunity to have a conversation about something that's real.
Yeah. So you can do that. I guess it depends on what you want out of your day, personally. If you would like a conversation like that, I don't know if they're necessarily the best targets for this. Mormons actually might be better, because Mormons, as far as I am aware, generally have a distinct 2-year mission period where they are entirely focused on this, and that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
The Jehovah's Witnesses don't have that. They do have some people that will go out and go on missions for 2 or more years to different places, but they are very much everyone must volunteer to do this all the time kind of thing, which brings a much more amateurish aspect to it, I guess. And more than that, for Jehovah's Witnesses, there was a distinct reluctant, I'm doing this out of obligation because I have to kind of feeling to it. So you're much more likely to get people who don't want to necessarily deeply engage. I mean, they might. There will be people who are so happy to engage with you because, like, oh my God, they are possibly saving a soul for Jesus. But that's because most people who engage with them are people who are at a point in their life where something has gone terrible and they are looking for some sort of community, some sort of spiritual intervention, something. Like, these things are super rare, but they do happen. And that's why people go knocking on doors. Like, they will sometimes walk in on someone who just got news that their parent died and is having an existential crisis. And then, like, someone shows up with a Bible at their door and it's like, oh my God, it's a sign from God. That's absolutely great for the witnesses when that happens. I had an old friend from my childhood call me two and a half years ago. It was during COVID. So they were doing calling instead of knocking on doors. And he wanted to talk to me about Jesus. And I was like, oh, great. And so we started talking, and I did the more Socratic thing, like, why do you believe this? Well, that seems kind of strange. Isn't this, another possibility? And I actually tried to do this sort of street epistemology, asking him why he believed things and digging down on things. And after about 10 minutes, he got very uncomfortable. And 5 more minutes after that, he excused himself. He's like, okay, I got to go. So they're looking for converts. They're not necessarily looking to have a big conversation that they may or may not be ready for. It's possible. Also, lots of times it's maybe hard to directly engage them in what they personally believe, because there are Jehovah's Witnesses have 5 hours of meetings every week in their churches, and one of those hours is specifically teaching the congregation rhetoric and rhetorical techniques. Wow. And they already have they know what positions they're supposed to take with people. When I was in, my early teens and arguing online about God, I originally started out as arguing pro-God. I had the book of evolution and why it's wrong that was given to me by the society, which is what they called the church organization, the Watchtower Society. I read through the whole thing and I had all the arguments already laid out in front of me. Yeah. And thank God, I guess, for the patience of my interlocutor on the other end of this BBS, who just took the time to go through all these and actually show me research and show me the few places where they just had literal lies in the book. I was like, oh my God, what the hell? It was part of the beginning of my downfall from the religion. I think there's better places to have those conversations if you want to have them. But in terms of being able to actually talk to someone face to face and really dig into things, possibly. It's worth a shot, I guess, if you want to do that.
What you're saying about the Mormons being better for this does, in fact, now that you're saying this, fit my experience of this. Though the last time that I've had a Jehovah's Witness come to my door, I was an evangelical in, I think, high school, and we got in a giant fight, and it was unpleasant for everybody involved. The last time they came to my door, but I wasn't there, was when my wife, who always kind of rolls her eyes when I do these deep engagements from door-to-door proselytizers. She opened the door with our at that moment infant son on her knee while he was having a fit, and they asked her something like, "Have you ever wondered where all of the evil in the world comes from?" And she said, "Well, I believe that the line between good and evil runs down the center of every human heart, and who would cut away a piece of his own heart?" They're like, "You've never what?" And then she excused herself from that, which actually, in retrospect, seems like maybe a compromise between what I would do and Stephen, what you would defend one's right to do and the wisdom of doing.
My main thing is that I wouldn't want to burn their time. Just like with the salesperson, if there is a neighbor who wants to buy their service, it's not me. I don't want them to burn half an hour trying to talk me into something that I'm not going to buy. And if because their goal at the end of the day is to try and make money, just like the goal of the proselytizer is trying to get to win a convert. And if it's not going to work at my house, I want you to go next door and try them, because I don't want you to waste your time on me.
Part of my motivation for keeping that friend on the line as long as I did was I thought, you know what, this is kind of fun for me. And for every minute that I can keep him on the line, that's one more minute I've spared the general population from being assaulted by these people.
Oh, man, that's interesting. I do exactly the same thing for exactly the opposite reasons. There's a guy, a sociologist of religion named Rodney Stark, who wrote a book called The Rise of Mormonism, where he looked at like sociologically, like how can we explain why Mormonism has been doing so very well since its inception. Like, you'd think that it's because they send people door to door, and he's like, nope, it's not.
Yeah,
it's actually really bad.
Very low.
Like, the numbers on that are like something like less than 1 in 1,000.
Yeah,
do that. So I actually feel like the rest of their day is not going to be spent successfully evangelizing. And, like, as another human being who like values thinking seriously about the things that matter, I feel like, the greatest thing that I can do for them is to help them have an experience of, like being listened to, having somebody give them a glass of water. And then, maybe like introducing some questions or a new perspective from them. Yeah.
I once had an Uber driver who was playing some really awesome music, and I asked him about it. Turned out to be Hare Krishna, like sort of chanty stuff. Yeah. Those guys have got fantastic music. Anyways, he like gave me a little spiel, and in the end I took a tract from him, and I threw it away soon after. But like, I know I absolutely made his day by listening to that. And he was like, oh, I made have a convert. I give away a tract, So that was kind of nice. Because I remember being in that position.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't know you door-to-door proselytized. I want to hear more about that. But Brandon, I do like your approach, and I think I'll take that to give them a break from getting the door slammed in their face. Because I'm always very polite with the salespeople. I haven't had any religious salespeople come to the door yet, but I think you're right. Like, yeah, they're not gonna get a sale at my neighbor's house. So I get to tell them, hey, you know what? I think there's virtually no chance you're going to convince me to join your church. But if you'd like to come in and talk, you're more than welcome to. And then the ball's in their court if they want to, try their hand next door, if they want to come in and hang out for a bit. Because you're right. I think that the job sounds super boring, and the best I could do to brighten their day,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, to actually get to experience somebody. I have done a little bit of door-to-door evangelism before when I was a Protestant, and it was so terrible. And I think I could probably still rustle up some experiences of the in my memory of the people who were really nice about that. It's a little bit goes a long way. If the fear is, but I'm busy and I'm in the middle of something, like, they'll come back. You can just tell them that you can't do it right there. But like, is there a time in the next couple of weeks, like on a Thursday afternoon, between these times? And if it's not them, they'll find somebody else to come back. Probably, at least the Mormons do.
Yeah, everyone hates doing it. Maybe the most zealous radical people might not, but yeah, the fact that everyone in the church was compelled to do this was kind of awful. And I think it was much more of a social bonding, like we all go through this horrible experience together, rather than doing it to get converts. And ultimately,
I'm guessing also it sets up an oppositional relationship with non-Jehovah's Witnesses. Look how terrible they are to us.
Yeah, it others you, which is good for group cohesion.
Yeah. Is it true that the Watchtower Gospel and Tract Society, I'm getting that full name wrong, I think, is actually run by a compound of people living in New York City, a compound of single men, right? If I'm remembering this correctly, living in New York City?
They're definitely living in New York State. I think they're in Bethlehem.
Okay.
That is at least where the printing presses were back when I was a Jehovah's Witness. But again, this was like late 80s, early 90s. So my information will be decades out of date. I don't know if they moved it. I don't think they were single men, because marrying is not forbidden in the clergy in this religion. But I I don't know the inner workings of the leadership, so I can't tell you for sure.
I have not been inside of a watchtower, Kingdom Hall before. That's the name of the church buildings, right? And I'm frankly unlikely to ever be. One of my big realizations after stopping being a Christian is that, like Jehovah's Witnesses in many ways are not weird. Like they are basically another like evangelical fundamentalist sect. I grew up hearing that they were a cult, and I do think that they actually hit most of the buttons that you need to hit in order to qualify as a cult, but they're a weirdly orthodox Christian cult with the major twist that they don't believe in the Trinity, which if, you grew up as a Protestant Christian, there's like a really big thing, right? They're damned to hell because they don't believe in the Trinity. Meanwhile, there are lots of other Christians who do not quite believe in the Trinity. Some of them are mega church pastors, and hardly anybody ever brings this up in polite conversation. So it really seems like that was a post hoc rationalization for why it is that we hate these people. But if we were to go into a Kingdom Hall on a Sunday morning, what would we see?
It would be hard to distinguish it from just a conference room at a business. They don't have much religious iconography. They don't hang crosses or anything. They are actually specifically anti-cross. One of the big things that they try to do to separate themselves from other Christians is that Jesus did not die on a cross. He died on a single wooden stake.
That's right.
Kind of weird, but like there'll be one or two quotes from the Bible up, and aside from that, it's just a stage with a podium and a whole bunch of chairs in rows facing towards it.
Reminiscent of John Calvin's church. Sorry.
A quick rabbit hole before we move forward. The Trinity always kind of confused me. I don't know if there's a quick sales pitch that you can give. God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, they're all supposed to be part of the same thing. I never knew what the Holy Spirit was, and it was never important to me why it was important that people believe that God and Jesus are different when they're also the same. Like, is there a short way to convey what the hell that actually means?
I mean, all of the historic short ways of doing it are, technically speaking, Christian heresies. There's a fun YouTube video. If you look up, that's Modalism Patrick, where St. Patrick is asked by some Gaelic rubes to explain the Trinity. And he says, okay, it's like the shamrock. And they said, what? That actually falls under the very specific heading of this like weird heresy. It's like, oh, okay. It's actually, the Trinity is like how water can become steam or a liquid or a gas. That's modalism, Patrick! So all of the usual attempts to explain this fail. But your real question, right, was not how is this explained, but why is this important? I'm going to get this really wrong here. And
I'm also curious what the Holy Ghost is.
It's God living inside of you, which is part of why it's important. Maybe the major reason, actually, why it's important that the Holy Spirit is, or the Holy Ghost is understood to be God also. Because we say that we here, meaning Christians, which I am no longer one of, although, you never know what's going to happen.
Oh, no.
I put the odds of me converting back to something like Christianity at 5%. I have for years. I think it's important to sort of force myself to keep my options open. Sorry. So the fact that God is living inside of you is this big thing. And so then that has to be God too.
I see. And they liked the idea of having three things. So it seems like it could have just all be God, right? God is all of these things, and there's no reason to separate them. I'm sure there's some historical reason why they picked on three things, right?
Well, it's weird that you have Jesus praying to God.
Yeah, I always thought so too. There was a sketch on the show 30 Rock where God was like an assistant detective played by Patrick Baldwin, and then he's talking about with his co-detective. Let's pray, and the guy's like, to who? Because God is his partner there, and it's like, who are you praying to? So yeah, it does seem weird that Jesus would pray when he's really just introspecting, maybe.
So I remember one of my history of theology classes was really try to figure out where does the doctrine of the Trinity come from, and it comes much less from the idea of the Holy Spirit that really I was taught was kind of tacked on. This is taught by an Orthodox Christian fella, but it's really trying to figure out what the heck is going on between Jesus and God the quote Father in this. How can God pray to himself? The interesting twist in the story is that they end up, the Orthodox way of conceptualizing this ends up being to say that we have three, not parts of one God, not three pieces, but three persons that share one essence of God. which is really interesting because it is my vague historical understanding that Christians used that word personas before that word came into common usage in any European language.
Oh.
So it's almost definitionally true in Christian theology that God is of three people, even though it seems so weird. Like if you go to any of your Christian friends and say, oh yeah, do you think that like God is multiple people? They'll look at you very strange. But that is literally the thing that they are supposed to say that they believe every week.
I appreciate the digression. I don't want to keep us too far afield or far afield for too long.
I personally kind of feel that both this and transubstantiation are almost psychedelic tools. They're concepts that cannot make sense in the literal way, but you're supposed to try to hold the concept as a coherent thing in your head, and doing that puts you into this weird altered headspace, which is not entirely unlike being on shrooms or LSD. It's really kind of fun, and it taps into what it is religions are trying to evoke in people. So, in that way, an adaptive technique.
I mean, I do the same thing with particle wave duality. This is why I never attack my Christian friends for believing in the Trinity, because I know that they will just turn around and attack me for that. And like, yeah, doesn't fit. I believe that it's true because I understand some of the experiments and how they're really weird experiments and what happens when you shoot some light through a slit really quickly. But my mind is not evolved to make sense of this, of this aspect of ultimate reality. And they would just say the same thing. I'm like, yeah. Maybe there's a difference here that I'm not seeing, but that seems fair. Okay, so is there anything else that you'd like to tell us, Eneasz, about growing up Jehovah's Witness? Not having birthdays, knowing that you are of the same religion that both Michael Jackson and Danny, the guy who's on Community, he's a hip-hop star.
Donald Glover,
there we go.
He was a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah, if you watch Community, actually, his character is also...
Yeah, his character was Jehovah's Witness. Is Donald Glover, though?
Yeah, X also.
Oh my God.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So neat.
Yeah, nobody ever makes that up.
Prince, too.
I didn't know that. What the heck?
Right. What is there to say? It's very isolating. They want to keep separate from the rest of the world because the world is ruled by Satan and we are trying not to be ruled by Satan. That means you're encouraged to only have friends in the church, and that kind of sucks. It does intentionally weird you. But a lot of rationalists have isolated childhoods, and often from orthodox, strict religious sort of upbringings. I don't know. Another thing about being raised Jehovah's Witness, they have such a strong emphasis on truth. That is one of the things I actually really like about them.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that drove me to becoming an atheist, because I strongly believed, as my religion taught, that as long as you keep pursuing the truth, you cannot go wrong. You'll eventually get to where you need to be. And for quite a while, I thought that if anyone just pursues truth long enough, they'll eventually end up at atheism. And I don't necessarily believe that anymore, but the fact that my religion did emphasize it so much brought me to where I am, and I really appreciate that.
Did you, a second ago, I think you just said that you learned that anybody who pursues truth will become an atheist, and you don't believe that necessarily anymore. Did you mean to say theist there?
No.
Okay,
no, I mean, I right up until a few years ago, I thought anyone who pursues truth long enough and strongly enough will end up an atheist, because that's just where the natural world points you to.
It sounded like at the beginning of our conversation that you were saying something very similar to that.
Yep, that is a thing that I think is very close to the truth.
How have you changed in the last couple of years about that?
I think there's a lot of other drives in a human than just knowing what is physically true. And so trying to pursue just the truth can lead you to places where you can make allowances for, but actually maybe these things are true in some other way that won't bring you all the way to atheism.
Yeah, I think that some people can kind of draw distinctions between certain magisteria, who might say, it's true that I need to go this way, and then this way to make it to the store if I leave my house, right? And that'll always be true. Is it also true that there's something it's like to be a cricket? Those are kinds of different claims that ordinary truth-seeking... clearly you're pursuing different kinds of tools, or using different kinds of tools to answer those two questions, right?
Yeah.
There's some things that right now we literally cannot know. And in there's enough wiggle room that you can say things like, but it is true that humans need community and they need these various needs met. And so we can find spirituality and belonging in other ways, that even if you are pursuing truth, there's enough wiggle room to still be like, you know what, this is probably close enough that I can say I don't know for sure. So I don't think it'll necessarily lead to atheism if you have different priors and some different things that you focus on.
Last week, I taught a summer camp on Bayes and Bigfoot, and like taught kids how to do basic Bayesian reasoning, with the little square that we draw for this, to do that in the graphical way as opposed to writing out the whole equation and all of that. Sorry, if I say that, do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I can picture it.
I think one of the last times that Ayla was on, she actually referenced this. If I'm getting my podcasts not mixed up, I'll send you a thing. There's actually a visual way of doing Bayesian statistics that is perfectly, beautifully intuitive.
Is it like the bucket and waterfall thing?
I don't know that one, but probably, at the end of the day, all metaphors that work are going to catch out to be the same thing. So probably it's like it. But I taught kids how to do this, like even like, elementary school kids. And by the end of the week, like we'd gone through a bunch of the different arguments and evidences for Bigfoot, and then talked about, right, like what are our priors, what should our base rate be, our priors be on Bigfoot, and then how do we adjust this again and again and again based on every one of these pieces of evidence, based on how strong we think the evidence is for this. And then we got a number for Bigfoot. It was amazing. And so I had like all of this Bigfoot in the head recently. And I was getting together with one of my many Christian friends. I feel like most of my friends are either theologians or pastors or pastor theologians or whatever. I asked him, what's the difference between God and Bigfoot? And then only after asking that, even exactly like you with the unicorns, realized, oh my gosh, that sounds like I'm just being the world's biggest jackass. But I meant it like in the, how do you come at belief? Like, should you reason about the existence of Bigfoot differently than you reason about the existence of God?
I don't think that's you being a jackass at all, though. Like, that is a fair question for anything, not just necessarily God. And if someone gets offended by that, that is their issue. That is them saying, like, I want this special thing carved out just for me. And, okay, I'm trying to internalize that with the Peace of Westphalia, we did this for a reason. It helped us prevent, years of bloodshed and genocide. But, man, it really annoys me when people get specifically hurt and say that it is an asshole thing to ask that. Like... I'm a high decoupler, and I'm trying to internalize that actually sometimes things are coupled for a good reason because it prevents violence. But man, that annoys me when like people are like, "Oh, I realized it was a bad question." Like, no, it was a perfectly fine question.
Yeah, and the perfectly fine response would be like, "Look, yeah, the investigative process would be different. Like to find Bigfoot, we'll go search in the forest wherever we think he might be. That's not where we'll find God, just camping out behind a tree, right?" Someone should just hear that question and give it a calm, reasonable answer rather than say, "How dare you?"
I think it rings alarm bells in my head the way that I asked it. That are like, if I don't know, angry internet atheist was trying to mock religion, another person's belief, like they would ask that sort of thing, like, tell me how God is different than the tooth fairy, like that. So I was worried about appearing the wrong way. But Eneasz, I really appreciate you saying that you were irritated by my response to that. I think that I, because of various personal history things, skew really far toward being absurdly respectful to most beliefs that I disagree with, especially religious beliefs. And this is fine. This is my personality at this stage. But yeah, I respect your way of doing that too, and I can understand how that could cheese you off.
Well, like I said, I've been coming to accept that there were good social reasons for this to prevent religious violence. So.
Well, what's really weird though is when I asked now I've asked a number of religious friends this, and non-religious friends too, and I've gotten totally different answers to the how do we reason about these things differently. A rad trad Catholic seminarian acquaintance said, I think they're exactly the same thing. I think that we should look for evidence for
That's
both
awesome.
of these, and I can point you to some evidence of Eucharistic miracles, and so we're going to have that conversation. And another friend said, I think they're totally different because I really need to have hope in something big. I recognize that about myself psychologically, and I think that I don't need to have hope in Bigfoot. Bigfoot would not give me hope. That is just another fact in the world. Is not a fact about how I should live my life. And another friend, an Eastern Orthodox theologian, said, I think they're exactly the same, and you should believe in both because they're the better story. Which is the weirdest answer possible to me. We're getting together for a couple hour-long walk tomorrow just to chew it out.
I kind of love that answer purely just on aesthetic value. He's living his richest life right there.
Can I mention one quick thing that Eneasz didn't bring up in this episode, but I think he mentioned at some point years ago? That one of the benefits of growing up Jehovah's Witness was that the othering, being weird for other people, taught you anti-conformity in a way that most kids don't learn. You got to sit down during the Pledge of Allegiance while everyone else stood and looked at you weird. And then I think that prepped you for later in life, being able to stand up and say weird things while everyone looked at you weird.
Right.
I think that's actually a huge boon.
Yeah.
I guess, and maybe this is one of the reasons I don't care about saying, let's look at Bigfoot, how is he different from God kind of things, because I never got that instinct. That's not entirely true. I certainly still have the instinct somewhat, but I have much more calluses around just say the thing and don't care about people looking at you weird for it.
Yeah.
And it's shocking how not a big deal going against societal norms is the vast majority of the time. You hear about people having their livelihood destroyed and whatever, specifically because it is so rare and so unusual that they have to make huge examples of them. It's like the old medieval times where 99 out of 100 crimes went unpunished because they just didn't catch the people. So when they did catch someone, they cut off their hand or they, skinned them alive in the public square just to really put it into everybody's head. If you do get caught, the consequences are going to be awful. It's not that you don't get caught. It's just that it really does not matter. The people who know you are going to be okay with you because they know who you are anyway. And the people who want to hate you, they don't need an excuse for it. They're going to dislike you as it is. So say what you want to say and try to be as true to yourself as possible. And I know I don't live up to that either a lot of the times, but it was made easier by being the guy when everyone else is writing out little Valentine's Day cards and passing them to each other. I get excused to go into the hallway and read a book for an hour because that's worshiping the god of lust or something.
Those third graders, man. Those lustful third graders.
And it's terrible.
Last thing I want to dig into before we move into your modern religion, Eneasz, was did you have any memorable experiences proselytizing?
Not really, aside just from it being awful and uncomfortable. The last time I did it door to door, I was, maybe 10 or 11. I was still a prop at that point. I did it a lot online during the early atheism wars where, again, I was fighting as a Christian. And that was very eye-opening when I actually met with people that were intelligent and had good counters. I would advise anyone to do that if they're really interested in defending what they think is true, because having smart opposition is a great thing. And I think insulating ourselves from our opponents, it leads to the bad ideas sticking around. Having good opponents lets you whack down the bad ones and just keep the good ones.
Awesome.
Oh, another interesting thing about Jehovah's Witnesses is because the world is ruled by Satan, they're not allowed to participate in politics, which includes not voting at all, which I think is maybe almost a good thing because it means they're not really a target for political actors, and they don't get wrapped up in the politics quite as much. They still comment on it a bit, but the fact that you literally cannot vote, cannot engage in political action, gives you a little bit of enforced touch grassiness. This may be somewhat helpful.
If I'm trying to guess the cultural proclivities of your average Jehovah's Witness, they're going to be really conservative culturally and anti-woke. Is that right?
I don't know about anti-woke because wokeism didn't exist when I left the religion, but definitely they're culturally conservative. Yeah, you're not supposed to drink, you're not supposed to smoke, you're not supposed to curse. Just think of the straight-laced Christian and you have your Jehovah's Witness.
It's interesting to think about how much my experience of really conservative folk is influenced by like this whole thing, right, called the religious right, the moral majority, and all of that stemmed in opposition to Roe v. Wade, and burgeoned as a subculture that was specifically organized for political ends, or at least in part organized for political ends. And to imagine, what if you were part of a group that just sat that out entirely? That, in fact, like nobody else than the Christian right actually wanted to touch, and what would happen with that culturally? Okay, I guess it seems like the land that time forgot, or something like that. Now, I think I actually, if I wanted to, Eneasz, go and take a tour of my local Kingdom Hall, I can just show up on a Sunday morning, right?
Yeah. It'd probably be better to dress in nicer clothes, but they generally welcome people in.
You don't know how I dress. What kind of assumptions are behind that? No, thank you. That's very helpful.
Fair
enough. Okay, why do you want a religion?
How
about this? Why do you, if it's easier, what are some, if you were to go in rationalist circles and just say, I'm interested in starting a religion, who's with me? What are some possible ways that people might misunderstand what you're trying to do?
For starters, some people think that I want to introduce some sort of supernaturalism, which I absolutely loathe and do not want at all.
You should listen to your podcast more.
I suppose, but like when you start using words like spirituality and religion, there's it's not wrong for people to raise their hackles a bit, you know?
Okay.
What I want is something to provide a bit of structure and ability for people to coordinate beyond what we have now. Like, we are extremely contrarian roots, very individualistic, and that also leads to like some isolation and alienation. We're generally a very high trust society. Like, if you go to a rationalist meetup, people just like leave things out. People help people in any way they want. I have hosted rationalists coming through Denver a few times, crashing on my couch, just like, oh, cool, yeah, you're a rat in good standing, I trust you. And it's been fine because we are generally good people and high trust amongst each other. You go to events like Less Online or Vibe Camp, and everyone's just kind of chill. You don't have to worry about things, and that's great. And I think it would be good to have something like that where people have a deeper sense of community and ability to turn to each other for things that they need. They have this more in the San Francisco area, and I think it's probably just in large part due to the high concentration of rationalists there and how many of them live close to each other. But they even have now a bunch of people having children around the same age and all being like, wow, public education is absolutely awful. We can do better than this. And starting their own almost, I know you're big on this with your Egon method of education, but those sorts of schools where there are just interested adults around helping children, teaching them things and guiding them through education in a way that no public school could ever achieve.
Yeah.
And it's these sorts of things like, when I lose my job, are there people around that I can fall back on for a little bit? If I need someone to help me move, do we have that? And you can't get that without a community. And it seems a big part of having a consistent, stable community is having some sort of ritual framework that binds people on a deeper emotional level. And I think that is why people are leaving for things like Catholicism and Mormonism, because they have the ritual technology that is needed to bind humans in that way. And we have the shared philosophy. We have the shared even neuroarchetype, which is not that usual in religions. Like, they just take people from everywhere. But like, we actually think very similar and relate to the world in very similar ways. But we don't have any sort of organizing structure or any sort of ritual or spiritual techniques to bind those things, to hook into the things that evolution put inside of humans to let them cohere into a unified group. And I think that is just huge amount of alpha we're leaving on the table that we could maybe pick up.
Do you guys remember Scott's post from, 2016, 2017, A Theory of Religion?
I do not.
It was a follow-up to his more famous post trying to explain the Shia-Sunni divide. And the theory of that post was something like, you had this rift in the community, and then they divided. What you see as the like doctrinal differences that everyone will harp upon if they say, oh, what's the difference between a Shia Muslim and a Sunni Muslim? They don't really matter, or if they matter at the margin. Like the crucial thing to understand is that they were two communities, and they did some small things different, and then they sort of like used those small things as a rallying flag of these are the reasons that we are so much better than the other group. He has this follow-up called The Theory of Religion, which is, you know, really short post. Actually, I recommend that everybody look it up. And in it, I hate it when I spend years studying a topic and then Scott comes in and like casually does the entire field better. This is one of the situations where he says, if you look at ancient Hebrew religion, it looks a lot more like the sort of thing you'd go if like you went to Bali or someplace that it doesn't matter what their religion is, but it is an old-fashioned culture. It's a traditional culture. Traditional cultures have their food norms, have their dressing norms, have their, here's how you shake each other's hands norms. And then it does like what, like modern Reform Judaism does or something like that. When we think about religion nowadays, we are looking at religions in the modern world. But to understand what religion really is at its core, he's saying something like, I might be getting him a little bit wrong here, you want to look back to see what religions were in traditional societies, in folk societies, in primitive, quote-unquote, societies. And I'm hearing you say that it's not that you're interested in making a new world religion, be it in, small or big, with, like these are our doctrines and whatever, but rather you are looking to use the ancient tools of religion to help make small local community richer and to allow people to access the skills and talents that are in the people around them better.
Yeah, absolutely. And importantly, I think that having a world religion would be terrible. I think that cultures and religions and whatever need to focus on maybe even geographically distinct areas, but certainly groups. Like the sort of culture that works for your local goth is not going to work for your local jock. It's not a matter of like one is better than the other. It's just that people are different and people are better served by different tools, different ways of being. We need a whole lot of different religions and different cultures because people are different and are better served in different ways. I just want to focus on the thing that would help the people that are most similar to me and most want this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like if there's other ways to be a rationalist, then obviously there's other ways to be a rationalist and people should do those if it helps them. I'm looking to help out the kind of people that would want this the same way I want this.
This explains to me some of your differences with excuse me, we should announce this, unless you are specifically not announcing this, but your sort of ongoing review of Malcolm and Simone Collins's book, a Pragmatist's Guide to Crafting Religion.
Yes. Spoilers for everyone. This is not a guide to crafting a religion. I was very disappointed in the book.
Yeah, you presaged that, I think, in one of the earlier chapters.
Oh, good. Okay. There's a lot of interesting stuff in it, and it's kind of fun to read, but it does not give you the tools to craft a religion.
Does it fail in the way that you are are the tools to what extent are the tools that it gives you the tools that you are interested in having to craft richer, thicker local community?
Basically zero.
Okay.
The tools that they're into is like, what beliefs can we inculcate in our children to make sure that they have many grandchildren? And that is, one, not what I'm interested in. And two, like, I'm far more interested in how to bind humans together, with social bonds, and also how to have this interface with the rest of society, with people who are outside of the religion, because that's going to be incredibly important too. Like, one of the things a religion should do is help people interact with people of other religions and with the greater governmental social structure that we all have to interact with.
When you've expressed this to people, and apparently you've expressed this to enough people that Claude, the AI, is aware of this because
what? I've expressed this to almost no one. I'm kind of hesitant to even put this podcast out here because I'm like, I'm not ready for this. I was going to wait at least another 6 months before I said
Feel free
anything
to sit in this
publicly.
as long as you'd like. I will say that this morning when I was preparing for this conversation, I went to Claude and I said, okay, like imagine that like I need to make a rationalist religion this weekend, right? Like what should I look at as to the other things that people in the rationalist community have been doing that have been like this, so I can take any lessons from this. And it recommended the Bayesian conspiracy.
Oh my God.
Eneasz.
Oh dear.
When you've expressed this to people, have they asked you if you've noticed the skulls?
Elaborate on that.
I mean,
which skulls in particular?
So I was, I don't usually make a deal of saying this. I was actually nervous about doing this because I thought, should I just keep this a secret? I don't exactly keep it a secret, but I also never talk about this with anybody. But I was really involved in the secular church movement, the atheist church movement of the sort of early, the early teens, I guess, at that point. Mm-hmm. When I lived in Seattle, I was actually the owner of the domain name churchforatheists.com, where I think somebody else has it now. Where I
Holy
blog,
shit!
Where I blog. I know. It's like, why didn't I keep paying that so then to sell it to somebody for a lot of money? That was a pretty freaking great real estate, right? Ours failed, and like the TLDR is that virtually all of the attempts from that period failed.
Yeah.
Ours failed. Ours wasn't even a clean failure because we didn't make it far enough before it was an interesting fail. I feel like if we had kept going for a while, we would have learned some more things. Mm-hmm. But nobody yet has gone back to do the retrospective of what the heck happened, and to put together what were the best practices of these things.
So I am extremely aware of these particular skulls, and which is one of the reasons I don't know how to step forward, and I am not ready to really do much of anything. And I've been spending a lot of time trying to explore spirituality and ritual, because I think the big problem with atheist churches is they explicitly don't have those, and for good reason. We're allergic to them based on all the bullshit that we had to live through as children or as teens. And due to the fact that it is just objectively false and stupid to believe in gods and angels and demons and all this. And yeah, my theist listeners are going to get upset about me, but come at me, bro. It's true. But those are many of the things that were installed in us by evolution to bring us together. Mm-hmm. And that is why right now I'm really interested in trying to figure out what the heck it is the post-rats are doing. Yeah. Because the atheists and the traditional Bayesian rationalists, as they would say, we don't have the vibes. We are absolutely missing whatever it is that can draw people together in a long-term, coherent, sticky bonding way. And the post-rats do have that. They pull a lot from hippies, from crazy woo things. And the tricky thing about it is that you do see a lot of the post-rats falling down into ways but now I think the universe actually has a consciousness that I can tap into, and I am but a small reflection of this greater conscious mind that includes all atoms that exist. And it's they keep falling into these weird mystic trap doors. And I want to avoid all those because that's basically just magic all over again. And I don't want that. But they are managing to tap into something. And I want to find a way to tap into what they're doing, the spiritual practice. And by spirituality, I mean, Wes is going to give me so much shit for this. He hates this word because he's like, it has the word spirit in it. It is intrinsically woo. But by spirituality, I mean a secular spirituality, feelings of connectedness to something bigger, to something that goes beyond the self, like a greater group, a greater time period. And I do think that we have many ways in our psychology to do that. Latching onto those hooks that have been installed in us is what is needed to draw people together. And finding a way to do that without going crazy and losing ourselves to mysticism is what I think the big project now is. And I don't know how to do that. Okay.
I think I have 3 major pieces of advice for you. This is really exciting. I thought I had 1 going into this. I think I have 3 now.
I don't want you to forget those questions, but I have a quick one. Did you explain exactly what the skulls are? Or did you guys just reach a common understanding? Because I don't think I've heard this.
Do you mean as a metaphor?
Yeah.
I should really be more careful about the situations where I just throw out that phrase. Then that probably sounds creepy to all the people that other people I've mentioned this to. Scott Alexander has a post. I forget what it's specifically addressing. Maybe it's rationalism. If you are, I have a friend who advocates for communism, and the question to ask all of our communist friends is, have you noticed the skulls? Are you aware that there have been lots of people flat out murdered by the belief system that you are saying that that is the solution to all of our problems? And if they say, yes, of course, we're not, how ridiculous to assume that we're going to make all the same mistakes that, Pol Pot's people did or whatever. And then the follow-up question is, but have you really noticed the skulls? And have you noticed that some of those skulls came there from other people who were in fact improving on the failed systems that came before them? How convincing an argument can you make that your way of pursuing this project is different enough from the past versions that it's not going to blow up and do a lot of damage?
Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate that. That's awesome. And
yeah.
I think that was partly inferable from context, but I also like, just to clarify, jargon sounds like a derisive word, but our shorthand lingos. So
yeah, jargon's a great term. I really do think he was referring to rationality in general, and things like, do you remember like what it was like when people tried to be super rational and Spock-like, and how that didn't work out? And part of the project of Eliezer being like, hey, emotions are very important, pay attention to them, was noticing the skulls, that when people try to be super rational, it didn't work out, and there's a reason for that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the elaboration. So, yeah, three questions. Hope you didn't forget them.
Three pieces of advice. Okay, so the first one is that you talk to a bunch of people who failed, or who've had some success, some moderate successes in the secular church movement already. And I know some people, and they know some more people, and I'd be delighted to make connections for you in that.
Oh, awesome! Then yes, please let me know.
I feel like there are, from kind of being in this community, there are some things that people can even point to. Of like, I can even tell you from my experience. Like, right, like what were the mistakes that we made in this?
What were the mistakes that you made?
We made a number of them. The biggest one for us was we had this period in the project where I was blogging a lot, and we were having these very tight conversations in people's living rooms once a week, I think, about, what our worldviews were. And that failed because we were too democratic. We didn't have a way of having people take turns and talking. This sounds so dumb, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't come in with like an assumption of here's how we are going to do things and here's how we are going to just stop the conversations from, having a few people just do 60% of the talking, then that fails. So we then moved from that. A family left from the project, and then we kind of jumped into the big time where we, started to incorporate as a nonprofit and had a board and blah, blah, blah. But all the people that we took on to make that board or whatever had never been part of our previous conversations. So we had no shared understanding of the world, or even like what the project was supposed to be. So for me, right, like coming into this, like as a former theologian, like this was about like us having a naturalistic worldview that was incredibly meaningful and helped us experience wonder and awe and connection with each other. And that spawned a bunch of practices that would knit us together as a group that could help one another. And for some of the other people, it was like, oh, like it could be like a platform, like you could have like a knitting circle. I don't mean to demean knitting circles. I know that they can do a lot of good and bad in the world. The fact that they can do such evil is actually probably a sign of how powerful they can be. But then like they were just sort of weirded out that we wanted to talk about philosophy. And you can't have a community whose only point is we should have community, is I think the hard lesson that I learned from both that ties together both of those. But there are lots of other people who have experienced lots of other failures, different failures, and I think it would be nice to make a catalog.
I do like the Guild of the Rose model, where the point of the community is to increase your rationality skills. It's definitely more than just we should have a community.
Yes. I realized a few hours ago that the Guild of the Rose is probably one of the closest things that exists to this in the rationalist community. Proud to say that I came up with that rather than Claude. Yeah, I think tapping into some of their things, if right, you were decide that like the goal is rationality, which I think it shouldn't be. So here, then let me jump to my second piece of advice. If the first one is actually do interviews of people who have made terrible mistakes and come up with a catalog of failures. The second thing is one specific person that I think you should talk to. If I say the name Tony Campolo, do either of you know who I'm talking about?
No.
It's safe to assume our audience might not, including your immediate audience, me and Eneasz.
Tony Campolo is one of the most important Protestant ministers of the last 50 years. Evangelical. He got enmeshed in presidential politics when Bill Clinton asked him after the Lewinsky scandal to be one of his advisors. Baptist preacher. Was always like the most liberal Baptist that you could ever point to. And then actually got embroiled in presidential politics a second time when a sermon that he had done titled God Damn America
Wow.
was riffed on by presidential candidate Barack Obama's black minister in Chicago, Reverend Wright. And then this got picked up in the national media as being like, oh, Barack Obama is an America hater. Just look at this church that he's going to. And hardly anybody connected to the fact like, oh, this is actually an evangelical sermon from a white evangelical pastor that the evangelical community mostly loves. This is buried in it. So anyway, he's a big deal. He has a son, and he raised the son kind of to be in the ministry with him. And he was until he became an atheist. And then this son, whose name is Bart Campolo, who carries forward all of his father's best qualities, became a humanist chaplain at one of the California schools. Not an atheist chaplain, but a humanist chaplain. A large fraction of the campus is not theistic, is not actively religious. How can we do the most good for them coming at this from like a religious-ish perspective? And so Bart Campolo is this humanist minister who in Cincinnati did an in-person sort of secular community that seemed to be doing very, very well before COVID snipped it, as COVID snipped so many other religious groups. And I think he's the person that you most want to talk to for this. A podcast just dropped yesterday on the wonderful podcast, I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist, where he and his co-host are guests on it. And near the end, they talk about what is the hope for secular community? And he and the hosts of that podcast actually go back and forth on whether this is even possible or not. And Bart Campolo is a big believer that it is possible. We just need to figure out what the recipe is for it. So he's a person who wants to talk to people like you about this. And he's such a cool person. His podcast is Humanize Me, just to put that out there. Humanize Me. Okay, sorry. Any questions about that? Because then I want to go into the really cool idea.
No, but that sounds awesome. And thank you for these resources. I'm going to try to track these people down and, I don't know, talk with them?
I've talked with Bart a little bit. I'd be happy to connect the two of you.
Oh, hell yeah, please do.
Okay, so this is the big exciting part of the podcast, the part that I was most excited to come on here and do.
Okay.
Stephen and Eneasz, if you look below your chairs right now, you will see. Okay, sorry. If you look in your inboxes right now, you will see something that I sent to you after we started doing this podcast. The thing that I was most excited about when I was an undergraduate to kind of help me kind of work through is Christianity true or not? At one point, I came on the idea that I think that the best argument for Christianity being true is the historical Jesus and what we can know about that historically. Because I was, a sort of a burgeoning empiricist. And so I got really into like the history of early Christianity. So I long known a lot about that, but my world and my worldview was rocked when years later, when I was in the atheist church movement, I ran across this book at a Barnes & Noble in Fargo, North Dakota, called The Rise of Christianity by the sociologist of religion that I mentioned before, a guy named Rodney Stark. He cut his teeth in the 60s going through can we predict which of these new cults in California are going to last and which ones won't, based on measurable attributes of these cults? And then he wrote this book on the rise of Mormonism. I think I'm getting the timing of this right, where he went back through Mormon history and looked at that. And then he went and did this deep dive in the rise of Christianity. What sociological phenomena can we put forward for this? Before him, people said, I guess the other explanation was like, oh, like Constantine, right? Like in 312, something like that, said, this is the religion of the state. But he wouldn't have done that if Christianity hadn't been on the rise. And you can actually look at the rise of Christianity and see that Christianity was every year adding on something like almost 4% new adherents. Every decade, something like about 40% new adherents. I know that exponents work a bit differently, but it's about that. It seems to be pretty steady on that. Constantine bet on a winning horse. He didn't ensure the win of Christianity. So what the heck was going on? Okay, so he really inaugurated the sociological study of this. And I made this document, which please do feel free to share with your audience for this. But he put together a bunch of these, and then I've added on some other ones that other scholars have put on. One of them was social networks. Is the best way podcasting wise for me just kind of like run through these verbally or what?
Yeah, go through them verbally.
Yeah, there's not too much to. It's not like paragraphs, so by all means.
So that Christianity spreads through social networks. The Roman Empire was centered around large cities, and people would move from one city to another, right? This is a thing that people can do in an empire. And they frequently had the problem of, I'm new in a city. Who can I trust? Because they had way lower levels of social trust than we do. I mean, and which is way higher levels of somebody will gut you, right? Than we have now. People, especially like Robert Wright, who wrote the book The Evolution of God, which I highly recommend to understand some of this stuff, talks about how Christianity was this operating system that you can. Well, it was a social network that you could come into, and like you move into a new city, you find where the church is, and then you find the people that you can trust and who can help you. So my suggestion for you is like, what is the rationalist version of that?
Like we kind of sort of have that on small scale informal thing. Like I said, like people willing to put up other rationalists on their couches.
Yeah.
It would be good, again, to have some more organization in this. My parents, when they came over here, they fled Poland. It was still under communist rule at the time, and took up as refugees in Germany. But when they came to the U.S., the fact that they were Jehovah's Witnesses was huge because they're, still a small kind of insular religion and very much like us versus the rest of the world kind of thing. The people in their church, like they helped them learn English. They literally were like, hey, I could use a worker to help me out in this job here. Like my dad was able to work as a laborer for someone despite barely knowing the language because the guy was like, yeah, you're a fellow witness. I can trust you. They helped give them like food and clothing initially. Like it was a very big deal to be part of the Jehovah's Witness network because it was still small and insular. And I'm not sure if just like being part of a large generic Christian church would have had the same thing.
Yeah. Although I'll say that large generic Christian churches that really do a good job, maybe they're no longer generic, that do a good job of this, like do work wonderfully to connect people. Especially people who move to new cities. There was this huge mega church in Seattle called Mars Hill that I had many friends who were part of when I lived in Seattle, that crashed and burned because its pastor was and continues to be a raging narcissist. But it did a wonderful job of connecting newbies in town.
The interesting thing, like with the rationalist thing, is because we are so distributed and so online, a lot of these sorts of things now are things like closed Facebook groups or Discord servers that, you get invited into where it's not like a traditional geographically located church with a hierarchy. And I don't know, it's harder to get into and there's less, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it exactly, but there's something there. And the onlineness of the movement really comes to the fore when you realize that's how a lot of this coordination happens.
If you are interested in talking about later some specific practices of what could be done that I think rationalists would like in lieu of or as the beginning seeds of a church service, we can talk about that.
Oh, that's huge. I would love to talk to you about that.
Yeah. Going back to Stark, one of the most interesting things that he found. You can make the strong argument, and all of these things are questioned. It's an active discourse community in the academy. But one of the coolest things that he found for what caused the rise of Christianity were the 2 or 3 plagues that happened between the years 33 and 300. Because what happened every time was that if you had the means to leave the cities, which were the most diseased, terrible, dangerous parts, you'd flee to your villa in the countryside. Christians didn't flee. They had Matthew 25 to kind of go back on, right? Like, when I was sick, did you not visit me? When I was in prison, did you not give me food? I'm maybe getting those backwards. For those of you who have not memorized much of 25th chapter of the book of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is giving this discourse where he's talking about who will go to heaven and who will go to hell, or who will survive in the world to come and who will be damned to the pit, depending on how you want to interpret that. But he famously says it's not just people who say, I believe in God, I believe in the Messiah, I'm part of this program, but it's the people who actually do the specific kinds, these particular kinds of good things. When people in the community, other Christians, are sick, do you visit them? Do you stay and do you nurse them? If they are in jail, do you visit them and give them help? So this is then interpreted hundreds of years later when people are fleeing the cities. Oh my gosh, like, you have to stay if you're a Christian. Otherwise, you will be damned. And so they stay and they minister to their sick co-religionists. Well, they also nurse their friends who are non-Christians, because of course they have a lot, who happen to be there. And if you are one of these people who, a lot of these diseases where like you basically crap yourself to death. So like some basic nursing really can go a long way. Like, you keep them full of fluids and they have a pretty high chance of surviving. If you survive because of the help of your sacrificial Christian neighbor, and all of your pagan friends have abandoned you, right? What are you going to do? Of course you're going to become a Christian. How could you not? So thinking then about like, what would our modern ways of doing something like that, leveraging that kind of idea be? And I have some, I'll say.
Give us 1 or 2 of them.
Do you want to? No, here, let's hold this back.
Okay.
Here, instead of me, then
we're going to have to like have a follow up where we talk about all these details.
Let's how about this? Instead then of me just going through these as I appear that I am incapable of doing in any kind of timely fashion, are there any of these that you feel like you don't understand that you'd like to know more about, like how the Christians did this, or any particularly spicy ones?
Not so much about the spicy things about how Christians did this, but I'm wondering how we'd adapt these to a rationalist religion. Just running through it, so it's a 3-columned spreadsheet, and on the left is a trait, and then the middle is Christianity of how they've done this, and then the right is rationalist religion. It's all blank. So like one thing I'd be curious about is, so let me read these: social networks, response to epidemics, treatment of women, martyrdom, prohibition of infanticide, inclusivity, coherent worldview, eschatology, organizational structure, miracles, and rituals. The 2 that jumped out at me as one that I might have a plausible thought of, and then one that I certainly don't. Martyrdom isn't something that we quite have in the rationalist sphere, but I could think of a way to squint at that and make that true. But miracles, I think, would have to be another slant. I mean, miracles could be something like maybe rationalists having a way above average base rate of becoming Bitcoin millionaires.
Right. Yeah, miracles is easy when you have science.
So miracles comes not actually from this Rodney Stark fellow, but from the guy Bart, the historian and textual critic Bart Ehrman, who many of your listeners might know of because he's sort of the most famous non-Christian biblical expert. A lot of my friends who are not Christians were made not Christians by reading a Bart Ehrman book. He went back and did a history of early Christianity, trying to account for the rise in it. And he said that He thinks that really like the thing that made Christianity go against what Rodney Stark says was the fact that Christians brought miracles. The specific miracles, if I'm remembering his argument correctly, and somebody should look this up, were healings and exorcisms, because exorcisms and healings are kind of really in the same category in the first century. I think that there is a boots ready, low hanging fruit way of doing something like this. For rationalists, it leverages the fact that the healthcare system in America, and I'm speaking America-centric here, is absolute hell to interact with. Mm-hmm. And then just being able to like cut through the maze and figure out, what should I be asking for? If I have a certain ailment, what should I be trying first? What should I be trying second? Because I know, I think all of us have talked about having chronic back pain before, right? Like, I just get so confused as like of all of the things that I could be doing, what should I be doing? And so there've been long periods of my life where I haven't done any of them. A rationalist group that was specifically had like some element of it that was based around like, what is your major like health problem or whatever? And like, would you like some help in just like researching online, pinging AIs, like to give me like a recommended, try this first, try this second, would be wonderful. And it would be ridiculous right now if I didn't mention the fact that, that Scott Alexander on his psychiatry website, LorianPsych.com, introduced me to this idea of like, you could just have a single document that would say, if you have depression, first you might try this, and then you might try this, and then you might try this, and then you might try this, where you walk up from like the really easy to do ones to the like really hard, expensive or time expensive or whatever ones, like electroconvulsive therapy or whatever, with depression. But it's helpful to go in just having a flow chart almost for this.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
I think we could do this. I mean, I think that, Stephen, you had actually turned me on to a less wrong post that basically does this for back pain. Tomorrow, I'm actually taking the next step forward in my journey through that document, actually. Nice. Like that plus Scott's stuff plus AI and WebMD, I feel like we could help each other make things like this. And then you could like, as part of your weekly meeting or your small group or whatever, say, okay, like where are you at in your flow chart? Need any like quick thoughts on that or whatever?
And also seeing as super AI is kind of the rationalist making a god thing anyway, having a whole consult with your local mini god is very apropos of.
Which is to say that I feel like there is an eschatology that is prevalent in rationalist circles. Mm-hmm. I feel like we do not lack for that. We actually are above many Christian denominations in the vibrancy of our eschatology.
Hell yeah, rationalists winning again.
Any of the other categories here that you'd like to ask about?
The rituals for me is, I think, particularly lacking in rationalism right now, which is why I'm spending so much more time experimenting with the post-rats.
And how was your solstice this year?
It was pretty good. I think part of the problem is that it only happens once a year, and it seems like it's still undergoing refinement. But we keep working.
Do you only do one of the solstices? Which one?
Yes. Winter solstice.
Oh, got it. Sorry, because I just assumed that you had celebrated the summer a couple days ago.
Oh, I had, actually. You're right. It didn't feel like nearly as much of a thing as the winter solstice is.
Yeah, there's a reason that we have so many religious holidays right around the solstice. For the rituals, I feel like the best... I mean, I think that talking to Bart Campolo would be amazing. Another person who is fantastic, and she has a book out, is Leo Libresco Sargent. She's a Substack blogger and a fan of Astral Codex, and is a quasi-traditionalist Catholic. But she wrote a book called Building the Benedict Option, a guide to gathering 2 or 3 together in his name. I have it right in front of me here. If I say the Benedict Option, do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
This radical Christian thinker named Rod Dreher wrote a book called The Benedict Option that said, he's actually a very subtle thinker, but he says, okay, like Christians in the West are in this crappy situation and we're doomed. We have made a terrible mistake by hooking ourselves to power. We should understand that we are going to be like persecuted minority for the rest of our lives and probably some time afterwards. Happily, Christians have been in situations like this before, and we actually like thrive when we're in that. The last time we had like a really bad situation was the fall of the Roman Empire, when not exactly a situation where they were religiously persecuted, but still, whatever. When Benedict of Nursia said, like the whole monastic movement of going out into the wilderness and being by ourselves, that's going nowhere. And the whole let's have the empire and run the empire, that's done for. So what we should do is we should sort of like we should like half secede from society and make these communities, these thriving communities, which we now call Benedictine monasteries, where we practice the lives that we think, the lives of full flourishing that we think are possible.
Oh, that sounds very similar to not entirely what rationalists are doing, but kind of, that the rest of the world is really insane and we're trying to stick more with ourselves and live the best lives we can.
Yeah. Yeah. My friend Ross Ritchie is a Substacker, We Are Not Saved, who is a Mormon rationalist. He reviewed Dreyer's book, The Benedict Option, a little while ago, and he came away saying, am I already living the Benedict option?
Mm-hmm.
But Leah has written this book that I recommend much more for us, called Building the Benedict Option, which is, okay, how do you do this? Like, how often should you have parties? What should happen at these parties? Even down to what are good foods and bad foods to make for parties? And like you don't want to make foods that you have to know the number of people who are coming ahead of time. You want a food that, like, especially like a pasta or something, that works well for vegetarians. It works well, like if you just have like more people coming, you throw in, the sauce takes a while, but you just throw in more noodles and you spread the sauce out a bit more. Really practical stuff. What do you do when some dude is creeping on one of the young women who's there and he's not even probably aware that he's doing it? Like, how do you come into those situations knowing what your plans are going to be to make people really feel welcomed and comforted? So highly recommend that book for you.
Okay, well, Brandon, we are running really close to the top of the hour. You have convinced me that I need to speak with a lot of people and maybe speak with you specifically in a series of things. We should, after this is done, exchange some emails, because I wouldn't mind going through all these things and what your thoughts on them are, all the various items here on your list.
Sure. Yeah.
Alrighty, but before we do all that, since we're getting close to when you have to go, you're doing things too with your life, including some kind of learning in-depth summer intensive?
My wife has been very kind to me, and we've been financially sacrificing all year long so that I could take the summer off from teaching to do sort of more big picture things. So one of the things that I'm doing is this learning in-depth cohort. Kieran Egan, the guy whose work I have set myself to spending the rest of my life sort of unpacking and bringing into reality.
And we got to say real quick, you won the ACX contest last year based on reviewing Egan's book, and we did 2 episodes about it. In fact, it's just a wonderful way of approaching education, and especially the education of younger children.
That was such a fun podcast interview to do those 2 of those. Thank you so much for having me on to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for doing this. I was also wondering, have you been going out to places like Less Online or Fluidity Forum or wherever to talk about these things more, manifest maybe? You
convinced me that I need to do at least one of those next year. So okay. I think I will be at I'm not sure which one, but I think I will put aside the money to do that. I have 3 kids and travel is difficult, but you've convinced me that I need to do that. So thank you for that. One of Egan's best boots ready ideas was this thing he called learning in depth, where you just assign kids in first grade a really boring topic like dust or the circus or the seashore or the solar system or something. And then you slowly, over the course of many years, give them little guides and prompts and help to learning more and more and more about this until their knowledge of this thing becomes this snowball that helps them connect almost everything that they have learned and brings them into deeper kinds of understanding than they ever would have had the opportunity to get before. So this summer, my friend Alessandro in Italy, a rising Egan scholar, he and I are co-leading an intensive learning in depth cohort, mostly for adults, where over the course of 6 weeks, we at the very first day, we assign you a very boring topic like dust. And then every morning in your inbox, you get this little poke of some new way of using AI to do some piece of learning, and a poke of some really wonky, hilarious, creative sort of thinking thing you could do on your topic that will bring you deeper into understanding your topic, with the idea that by the end of the 6 weeks, we can change people's understanding of what it means to understand. The other projects that I'm working on that are, frankly, I'm much more excited about at this particular moment in the day is that I got a Mana Fund funding to write a book on parenting and how to have deep, wonderful relationships with your kids through learning about the world by doing these certain sort of Egan stemming practices, quasi-rituals.
Man, that's outstanding.
Yeah. And then what's the final thing? That's the book. That's the other project. And I'm from doing this Bigfoot and Bayes class. I think I have stumbled upon a new way of making use of Bayes' theorem that I think really can bring something wonderful into how we educate kids. Where starting in middle school, like Bayes' theorem and the utilizing of such becomes one of the major pieces of math, such that you can, by getting into things like cryptids and UFOs, that you can help teach kids how to think rationally, not using Bayes' theorem as like the crowning achievement of like what you do, but rather as like the very first step that they use again and again and again and again, so that they can figure out, so that they can make all of the mistakes. And through this, learn to almost like gamify rational thinking.
Well, if someone wanted to get involved in one of these things, how would they do that?
Go to the Substack. What is my Substack? losttools.substack.com.
And do you still have room for this Learning in Depth Summer Intensive, or is that all filled up now?
We have a few seats left, actually. I haven't yet advertised it to one of my other big communities. I'm about to do that, so maybe there will still be time, but at the time that this podcast goes live.
You say they're dull topics, but there's topics in here like spacecraft and the wheel and dancing and light. Like, these do not sound like dull topics to me.
I mean, there's no topic that's dull, right? Like, is my work at,
okay.
I'm the founder of a company called Science is Weird that is reinventing the science curriculum. And Stephen, you had recently mentioned that you didn't understand how wind worked. And I want to talk with you about how wind worked, because I taught a class called Wind is Weird. And I can, like, in a few sentences, I think I can, like, help you go, whoa, about wind, because it's really weird.
Oh my God. Wait, Stephen, Brandon, you should do a Bayes blast together on how wind works.
Oh, I would love that.
I'll give you my understanding that I got from ChatGPT or Claude, and I forget, and then you tell me what it missed and help me make it more intuitive. But that sounds great.
That sounds so fun.
Man, this is a lot of fun. I would love to keep on, but I understand you've got a hard stop, and we're about 40 seconds out. So
yeah.
Thank you again for coming back. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me on.
We'll put all your stuff in the show notes. Everyone check out Brandon's stuff. You're doing remarkable things. This is really cool.
Yeah. Same back at you.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Toodles, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Eneasz, welcome back. We are doing the Less Wrong sequence posts for this episode, and are both recovering from colds.
Yeah.
Before I forget, speaking of Vibe Camp, I had a great time. I wanted to give just a shout out to Brooke and Booty and everyone else who coordinates, whose name I can't remember.
Dread Canary.
What I really appreciate about them, in addition to just making the thing happen, is that as coordinators and planners, they have to sacrifice some of the time that they could just be spent vibing like the rest of us to do all the coordination stuff.
Oh man, Yassine, I don't know if you managed to talk to him, but he was able to do almost nothing, I think, for the first almost 2 days, because he was just running around doing sound and DJ stuff.
Yeah, I bumped into him a couple times. Then I finally saw him, I think, on the last night in the tea house, and he had finally gotten a chance to chill. And he was like, man, I went to bed early last night. And I was like, oh, that's a drag, unless that's what you wanted. And he's like, oh, it's what I wanted. And I'm like, oh, good. Yeah. Thank goodness then, because people like Yassine and the other coordinators make these things happen. But yeah, we've got to appreciate that they're working.
Yeah.
And then we're just partying. So big shout out to them.
Yeah, they cannot have nearly as much fun as we can.
Hopefully there's some alternate fun in knowing that they made fun happen.
Oh yeah, it always feels really good being like part of that. And you get a lot of status. which is, kind of cool in itself.
I also enjoyed meeting a handful of listeners, Mary, Olivia, Luke. I checked before name dropping them. Vibecamp stresses anonymity. It was really fun. A lot of great conversations. I had a great time. And in fact, one of the conversations I had with somebody who whose name I don't remember relates to the posts we're about to cover. So,
ooh, okay. I also wanted to say I got to meet a couple listeners, both Mary and Olivia. Spent a lot more time with Mary since she was around Wes a lot. Delightful person, and got to sit down with Olivia and chat for 15, maybe 20 minutes. We talked about role-playing stuff. We talked about some other rationalist things. It was a fun time. So thank you for actually sitting down and chatting. It's very nice to meet people, and I always really enjoy just meeting people. So if you come to any future events, anybody who's listening, always feel free to say hey. And I did very briefly run into Luke. I think it was Luke.
Yeah. You're the one who introduced me to him.
But yeah, Luke just said hey, I like the podcast. I came here because I listened to it. Thanks for this. And I said, oh, thank you too. And it was just a quick touch in and move along. And that's also great. That makes me feel awesome. So thanks for that. If you're uncomfortable having a long conversation or whatever, you don't got to do that.
And he told me that one of the most valuable bits of Vibe Camp was Wes's and Jen's presentation on parenting, which I missed because I suck.
It's not because you suck.
The thing is, the whole thing passed in a blur. I don't even know what day it was. I remember, I think it was at 3, but I don't know what I was doing at that time. Nothing more important.
There were, often more than one thing scheduled at a time. And in addition to that, there's always 7 awesome people that and you want to catch up with, and or new people you want to meet. So you can't do everything.
That combined with the fact that I know Wes and Jen and can ask them individually later, and that I don't have plans to become a parent, it felt, maybe lower on my list of priorities. But the fact that Luke give us such high praise makes me regret missing it. So I'll have to wring the whole presentation out of the two of them at some point.
The people who go to the things that they really want to go to get a lot out of it, and that's great. And you shouldn't force yourself to go to things if you I always I have put on a Goth 101 thing several times, and people have gone to it. The numbers have always been low, but the people who go really like it, and that's what I want. I don't want people to show up out of obligation. People showing up and really getting something out of it means a lot. Yeah,
I regret not giving another presentation at this one, but the calendar is already more full than Vibe Clips.
You are going to have a hard time at Less Online then, because Less Online, in addition to having tons of interesting people that you want to talk with all the time, has, I think, 6 rooms of programming, and on the 2 big days, all 6 of them were booked nonstop.
It's kind of a drag. They should record those things.
I think they did record some of them, but it's the way it is.
Yeah, I feel like there definitely is an issue there, though, because, there could be 2 great presentations, and you can only be in one place at once. I think recording them and making them accessible, at least to people who attended the conference, makes sense.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they would disseminate the videos, and then no one would have any incentive to actually pay to go, so...
No, there's a lot to be gained from going. That's not just going to the seminars.
Oh, good.
The seminars are nice, too.
Well, yeah. Then start recording those guys.
Well, I recorded the one I did on secular spirituality and the rationalist religion, and I may put that up, but honestly... we covered about half of what I said during that thing just in this last episode with Brandon, which surprised me. I didn't realize that he was going to go into basically that same kind of thing and just be like, oh shit, okay, well, this is the reason I presented it at Less Online was because hey guys, I'm not entirely sure what to go do here. Throwing this out there, maybe, and we can all work on it together over time. And I wasn't ready for a big ass actual presentation on the podcast, but I guess here we are.
Well, if you recorded it, I'd be interested in listening to the whole thing just for fun.
Yeah, it's not a high quality recording. I'm going to see if I can fix it up with some sort of AI tools first, because it is somewhat difficult to hear the people talking.
I also recorded my Stoicism presentation at Vibe Clips, but the audio is shit. I was using, a wireless mic that was connected to my phone, which was then connected to my computer. And right. It was outside in semi-enclosed basketball arena with a roof and stuff. So
yeah. Anyways, we should move on to the rest of the show. But before we go to the post, we got to thank a certain guild of a certain flower.
Of a certain plant, that's right. The Guild of the Rose, of whom Olivia is a member, and I got to meet Raven at the conference. She seemed startled that I knew who she was because she wasn't wearing a name tag.
Wait, but Raven was at Vibe Camp?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I was told, find this person, and I was able to find her. And she seemed surprised, and I was like, oh, no, you're the one who made the Guild of the Rose website. And then I saw her face light up, and she was like, oh, thanks. And I was like, yeah, when they launched as part of the alpha, and they had a website, but now they have a website. It even works on my phone, and just for, half a minute, got to explain to her what a cool app she made. So
That's awesome.
yeah, that was fun.
And as we were talking with Brandon earlier in the episode, the Guild of the Rose kind of is the organization doing the closest thing to what I think we're trying to reach for. So if nothing else, they're a stepping stone along the way. They may just be the actual thing if that's how things develop. So like you can actually talk to the founders and the website programmers right now because they still have some level of accessibility to everyone who's there. So Guild of the Rose, leveling up your rationality.
Yeah, once they scale, they'll have less availability to talk to. But yeah, they're great. Yeah. And they run workshops for everything from how to dress more fashionably to probability, decision tree making. I'm articulating this poorly. But yeah, check out the guildoftherose.org. They're a partner of us that I couldn't be happier to partner with.
Absolutely. This is why we're partnered together, because we really believe in what they're doing. And you don't just learn things, you learn them together with people and build social bonds.
Which is, I think, better in every regard.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Alrighty. There was a couple of feedbacks.
Oh, of course. Yeah, because this one I wanted to pull out. This was timely. Ask Who reached out and said that...
Ask Who being the guy who runs the AI narration podcast. He covers a lot of these things. He also is doing all of Plane Crash and all of Luminosity. And he was doing all of Animorphs, but there was another one being worked on with real human voices, and the author was like, I would prefer just to keep the focus on that one. So instead, he is doing Pokemon Origin of the Species instead, which is another well-established ratfic, and the author, in this case, is totally on board with this one. I was like, hell yeah, do it, homie. Go to Ask Who Casts AI, and you can follow along with Pokemon Origin of the Species right now. It's just starting up in chapter 2 or 3, I think they're at now.
That's right. It's askwhocastsai.substack or .patreon. It's great stuff, and there's individual RSS feeds for these things. I think it's awesome. I listen to more books than I read. I'll be honest, I never would have gotten around to reading Pokemon on the Origin of Species, but there's a great chance I'll listen to it.
Yeah. So these next 3 user feedbacks are from the Discord, and they were all in response to Simone and Malcolm Collins when we had them come back on the follow-up episode arguing that death is a good thing. One of their arguments was that the young people are more progressive and pushing forward liberal society. Do the math comments that actually probably the most regressive parts of society are 12-year-old racists.
Take that, Collins.
Right. Can't find the fault in that logic there.
I am tempted to not even look for it because I disagree with the Collinses so staunchly, but I think they would argue that better to have a 12-year-old racist than a 62-year-old racist because the 12-year-old will grow up.
I mean,
maybe.
I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
And 12-year-olds don't have that much influence.
Yeah, but the 12-year-old racist can turn into a 17-year-old racist, and 17-year-olds are notorious for going out and beating people up and burning things down, whereas 62-year-olds generally don't do that anymore. They just post angry things on Facebook.
And vote.
That's true.
And or hold still, office. Vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is funny because I think one of them at some point mentioned, like, have you met people lately? And I should have been like, have you met kids lately?
Right.
Just put on open mic mode in the Fortnite lobby and listen to kids. Are you kidding me? But but their kids are being raised by awesome people, and I think that makes a big difference. So
and their kids are also not old enough yet that they're interested in playing a lot of Fortnite.
Right.
I think their oldest is 4, maybe 5. Not sure.
I feel like I played with 5-year-olds, man. I didn't start playing this game until 2 months ago, and it's actually a really well polished, awesome game. But I never play with strangers just because it's always just screaming kids that it feels like I don't know how they managed to navigate the PlayStation. Like they seem single-digit years of age and just totally helpless. But I digress. That my old man yells at bad gamers. Yeah, I want this feedback from Matt. I'm assuming this is our dear friend Matt.
Yes, Matt Freeman.
Yes. He wanted to say that having 3 kids removed much of my fear of death, but I still want to live forever. Yes, it's true that when you see little partial clones running around, you realize that something of you will live on, but I also want actual me to actually live on. That's well put, and that's a point that I feel like I couldn't get to land with them, that there's a difference between my descendants being able to talk to me, quote unquote, via even a high fidelity LLM, and me being able to talk to them. And I still don't know why maybe this is a running joke or something on their their discourse on this or something, but he ran straight to the rape analogy when I talked about enjoying a sunset. Amongst the other 1,000 differences, another important one is that when I'm enjoying a sunset, I'm not taking it away from anyone else. I'm not taking anything away from anybody by continuing to live, assuming I'm not being a social parasite. And I just I enjoy doing stuff, and I want to continue enjoying doing stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't understand lackadaisical attitude about, ceasing to enjoy their children's company.
Yeah.
I don't really get it. Not putting them down. I just still can't quite get where they're coming from.
It's a weird, different mind thing. Oh, did you ever text Brian Deacon and show him about actual deathists actually existing?
I will. We've got game night coming up. Maybe this Friday, maybe the one after, and awesome. I'll point him at it and be like, "See, but I think just the two of you are like, oh, those are just two nut jobs."
I mean, they speak for a decently sized community.
But Brian, he'll want a bigger number, and then he'll say it's not big enough. But at the very least, he can no longer say that nobody actually believes this.
There we go.
Yeah.
And finally, Gorky from the Discord points out that death doesn't seem to be the mechanism that diffuses power today. One of their arguments was that, all the old people amass all the power, and the only way to get rid of them is to kill them off. But generally, sure, a few people die in office, but it's rare. Usually people are voted out. The only real position where people actually are removed from power by death is the Supreme Court. Everything else, people tend to be voted out. When really rich people die, that doesn't really diffuse their money either, because they have trust funds and a billion other ways to keep the money going on to their inheritors. When companies are taken over or pass from leadership from one person to another, that's not because the old CEO died, usually. It's an interesting argument that death is what diffuses power when that doesn't seem to be the case, even right now.
It really doesn't. I mean, outside of niche, maybe not niche examples, but high profile ones, killing a dictator or something, right? George H.W. Bush didn't die in office, and his power essentially that he wielded across the country was later passed to his son, and then almost his other son.
Right.
Even assuming that, HW had died in office or something, or whatever, it's like, this is not the mechanism that removes power. You need to either end whole family lines or do, I guess, just giant wipes of the population or something for that to actually work. Yeah, there seem to be better ways of doing it. I think you put it really well. And I would have put it this way if you hadn't beat me to the punch, but because it's just the perfect, it's video game lingo. But when they were saying that, people just stop learning and they become less interested in developing new skills or whatever, and they get stagnant, and you're like, that sounds like a skill issue. And
yes,
because that's always the answer of I'm having trouble with this. It's like, yeah, that's your problem. That's not a problem with the game. You just suck.
Yeah.
And you can get better with practice. Yeah, these are solvable problems, and I think solvable by means other than annihilating the person forever. But yeah, I'm glad we had the conversation, but I don't think it moved the needle for me in favor of death at all. No. But it gave me some insight into the kinds of arguments people in real life make that are pro-death. So
yeah, it was still valuable to do. Alrighty, on to the less wrong posts.
I'll start with to spread science, keep it secret. And this is a follow-up to the last one we talked about. This is following the theme of how, scarcity makes information more valuable to people. He posits that no one studies science because they can just Google the answers, and therefore it's boring, so they don't bother Googling it.
Not that they don't study science, but that they don't find it to be valuable. They're like, oh, that's just boring knowledge. Why would I care how a light bulb works?
Yeah. So I guess I have a few thoughts on that. I did participate in an event at Vibe Camp called Human Library, yes. If you wanted to be a book, you wrote down a handful of things that people could walk around the table and see your sheet and be like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me ask you about that. One of them, I put the Bayesian conspiracy with no context. So if they hadn't heard of the podcast, it would draw eyes. And it did. Then I had to explain, it's a podcast that I'm on. And well, where's the name come from? Okay, so let me explain this. And this is essentially the Bayesian conspiracy, especially in the next post.
Yeah.
For us, it was a joke inside a joke, because that's what Harry names his cabal of two. The projects to unite magic and science. But we had the discussion about keeping science secret to make it more compelling to people, and the guy I was talking with really disagreed. He didn't see any value in that. We were trying to generate examples beyond the obvious of nuclear weapons, of the kinds of things that would be valuable to keep from people, and the kinds of things that people should be allowed to know without any training. On the easy side, it seems like keeping nutrition information secret seems like a bad idea. Although the information itself isn't secret. People can play with light bulbs. It's the idea is that you don't get to know how we found this out unless you want to learn how.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, this is always my excuse, in real life and at Vibe Camp, but I was too tired to put up my best argument. But yeah, I mean, so the information is available. It's not like you have to attend a university for 5 years to have light bulbs in your house. You just don't get to know how they work unless you don the robe and go to the middle of the night ceremony.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that this is the kind of thing that would actually be a positive on society?
It'd be more fun.
And that's really the point of this post, actually.
Yeah. I don't think it would be a positive for society, no, especially because so many kids, I don't know, actually, so many, maybe that's an exaggeration, but some number of kids in poor, well, I mean, I was going to say in poor villages overseas, but even like here in rural America, some kid in a rural town might just get interested in like how to make a certain thing or like how something works and Google it and teach themselves a whole hell of a lot. I basically taught myself programming way back in junior high and high school, and that was just freely available. And I know of people who've taught themselves a number of science or engineering things just because they're really interested in it. So that seems really good to just have that knowledge that anyone can look it up if they want to and learn stuff. It would be nice if people treated these sorts of knowledges like as reverently as they do the elder mysteries of Urdu or whoever the hell. But on the whole, I think we're probably better off how it is.
I think so. And I do think it'd be more fun. And I do like that the guild, I think, leans into this a bit. I at least know that all of their council member meetings, they wear silly hats. Maybe they'll do that for, higher level progression as things move along. Make the participants wear funny hats and do some jokey ritual, but all with tongue firmly in cheek, I think I agree. I mean, you and I and Yudkowsky are the kind of people that would find forbidden knowledge enticing, but there's lots of stuff that I'm not allowed to know that I just don't care to know. And maybe it's because the answers just aren't actually findable. My mind's drawn to politics just because we're talking about the presidents earlier, but Trump was like the first president in 30 or 40 years not to surrender his tax returns when he was running. That would have been information that people would have liked to see, but nobody really tried to get it because I think they maybe just understood that they couldn't. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other, are there secrets out there that I really care to know? I don't know. I mean, I guess especially as a kid, being told you're not allowed to know made it more compelling, right?
Yeah.
Now it just makes it annoying.
I've never cared about any president's tax returns, right? Like, I know they all submit them. I don't know what the number has been for any of them because who gives a fuck? But the fact that Trump was like, no, I'm not going to give you my tax returns. Now I want to know.
Right.
And I never wanted to know for anybody else. Yeah, it's absolutely a thing where if somebody tells you can't know it, you're like, hey, wait a minute.
That's a good point. I never looked over any of the other candidates' tax returns once. It was just more like, it was essentially him saying, I have stuff to hide and fuck you. And so it's like, well, now I want to know what you're hiding. Yeah, and that does make it more compelling.
I think a lot of secret societies have secrets. If we're really going down this route, like Scientologists have literally the secret knowledge that you have to advance and pay to get access to, and are very upset when South Park made that whole episode just outlining exactly what they believe.
Right. Well, but they suck is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm trying to think of things we'd want to know that are worth knowing, not lies that are hiding from us.
Okay. There's a lot of scientific research articles that are hidden behind paywalls, which really sucks. It's not that big a deal, but I don't want to pay $40 just to look up something when I'm having an argument with someone online. Like, I'm not going to pay $40 to prove that someone is wrong online. And
he points out the mundanity of that as well in this post about how, a mere paywall makes it it's one layer of secrecy, but it's not really secret. It just means like, yeah, you need to spend money, and that's not a cool kind of secret either.
He did have the interesting take that he thinks maybe future generations will regard papers that weren't in open access journals as not really science. That if it's not part of the public knowledge of humankind, it isn't science, and if you make people pay to read it, that disqualifies it.
I definitely like that idea. I mean, the argument's been super obvious just for especially in cases where it's publicly funded science. And it's like, you mean I already paid for this,
Yeah, but every now and then you get one of those questions like, what do you think we are doing right now that future generations will believe is atrocious? And it's always, almost always something like animals eating meat or factory farming animals. It's like, yeah, okay, everyone knows that. But like this kind of thing, if you had to pay to access scientific knowledge, it's not actually scientific knowledge. Like, that's an actual interesting answer to that question, you know?
It's interesting. I mean, to me, it's scientific knowledge if it's right, whether or not you had to pay to see it. But I could see that being like an egregious mistake we made along the way. Of course, it's the opposite of what he's kind of advocating for here, right?
Sorta, yeah. I think this this post is more of a fun thought experiment, a pointing out of how humans are than something he actually really advocates.
Yeah, agreed.
But it could be fun to try. Like, one of the things he points out is if everyone had a cult around their department, like of physics or of chemistry or whatever, then when Scientologists have their cult and their secret knowledge, people would start asking Scientologists things like, well, why haven't you given any public demonstrations of your 8th level powers like the physicists do? Or why should I study your cult when the dentists of doom can do very impressive things? And you can't do anything.
I work at a company with like 50 people and maybe 12 or 15 software engineers, and the platform team manages all of the whatever infrastructure to keep the app running. And they have access to all the secret passwords that let you actually write to the database, directly or whatever. And I've occasionally got my hands on some of these things, and I always keep them, even though I never plan on using them, just because they're secret and maybe I won't be able to use them later. Like, just the fact that like I can't just go to the knowledge directory that we have or whatever for the company and dig these up. The fact that like it is a secret that was handed to me makes me like actually save it because like, this is secret information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a funny quirk of ours. I think maybe there is some fruit to pull here.
I want to comment on a couple things in here which coincidentally worked very well with the topic that Brandon had, which happens a lot with these Less Wrong posts where they just seem to somehow magically dovetail with our topic without us actually planning it. He says here, if humanity had never made the religion mistake, never gone down the religious path, never learned to fear anything that smacks of religion, then maybe the PhD granting ceremony would involve litanies and chanting because, hey, that's what people like. Why take the fun out of everything? So there's a lot of emphasis on the fun of these things in this post. And I agree with him. They're a lot of fun and we do like these sorts of things. But like, this isn't just fun. It is fun, but it's also a powerful thing that is part of our psychology for what I'm assuming are important reasons. And I think that one of the reasons it's feared is because it is powerful. That like using those litanies and chanting managed to give groups a large amount of influence or power over their adherents, and that sometimes it's right to be afraid of power. Like we're afraid of nuclear things because we can do amazing things with them, and if they're misused, we can do amazingly horrible things with them.
Yeah. I also just like the idea of making things fun. Some people during graduation ceremonies will bedazzle their caps and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think Richard Feynman walked up the stairs backwards to receive his Nobel Prize.
Interesting.
Just because
he's a fun dude.
Yeah, he was. I think that just summarizes the kind of guy he was. If anyone hasn't read it, there's a great audiobook of Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. Mm-hmm. And I think he has a handful of autobiographies, but that was one I liked the most because it was the most fun. Mm-hmm. A couple of them seemed more serious and somber, but this is mainly just about antics going back to childhood.
Nice.
And he'd occasionally like crack safes. He was interested in that, but then he's disappointed to learn that like the tips were all just like look in the secretary's desk to see if they've written down the code or whatever. But then often that was actually the case. So,
oh my god, cool.
Yeah, just like now, people put sticky notes on their desk with their passwords or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah,
which they wouldn't have to do if they didn't make you change your password every 3 months.
Exactly.
So I can memorize a password, but I can't memorize 4 new passwords every year for just 3 months at a time.
My dad complains about that, and he gets mad because they will his password will be something like fucking password 1, and then when they tell him to change it, he tries to do fucking password 2, but then it's like, oh, this is too close to your old password.
Oh my god!
And it's like, and first of all right, so then I'll get off this, but the forcibly changing making people change their passwords is actually advised against by the National Institute of Security Technology.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's bad security practice because then it makes people, forget them and have to write them down and stuff.
Yeah.
If you let them set one secure one once, then they won't forget it. Just make them set an actually secure one.
We should let more people know about this, especially our bosses.
Right.
So he also says that people seem to have holes in their minds, and by holes in their minds, he means like the quote-unquote God-shaped hole in your soul, right? People seem to have holes in their minds for esoteric knowledge, deep secrets, the hidden truth. We've just gotten into the habit of presenting the hidden truth in a very unsatisfying way, wrapped up in false mundanity. This just immediately like struck my my attention sensors, because this is kind of like the same thing I've been calling like the hooks that we have in our psychology that I think, again, have been put there by evolution. And there are these things in us that want to be grabbed by various practices. I hadn't exactly thought of the idea of esoteric knowledge and hidden truths as one of these things, but like he has a damn good point. This is one of those things, and that's a good thing to keep in mind and to add to my notes. And I do think this is exactly the problem that Brandon was talking about with the secular churches, the atheist church, that they don't have a satisfying way of engaging with those. The esoteric knowledge, the hidden truth, there's nothing in the church that grabs onto those and drags the adherents in with them. And that is one of the big reasons they failed.
Yeah, I think there's something to that.
And importantly, the next thing Eliezer says is that if the holes for secret knowledge are not filled by true beliefs, they will be filled by false beliefs. If it was it's just there and it's not engaged with, no big deal. People can have friends or not have friends. But seeing more and more people getting engaged by Mormonism or Catholicism or something, like intelligent, rational people, it's really kind of pointing out to me that if they are left unengaged long enough, people seem to get, like he says, that it's filled by a false belief, and we don't have a true belief to grab onto those things right now, and that's a big danger issue problem.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, people will...
Failure mode of rationality.
Yeah, people will make up answers if they're not available. Or they'll believe whatever lies someone else is willing to sell them, which could be another downside of actually keeping science secret this way, is that someone could be willing to sell them false explanations for less. Right?
That's true. How would you know which science is the real science and which science is the Scientology if it was all hidden away and cloaked in mystery?
I guess you'd want demonstrations from their 8th level physicists or something, right?
That's true. That would work. As long as it's actual physics and not like, James Randi magician stuff.
And that's the thing, though, it'd be hard to tell.
Yeah.
There's that fun thing that a handful of people have done, where they'll hold a cannonball at the end of a pendulum swing, like release it, and then stand there as it approaches their face and not move, because they know that it won't move further than how far it was raised or whatever. I'm not describing this well. That's sort of a demonstration, but any snake oil salesman could give you some false explanation for why that's the case, right? I guess I don't know what an 8th level physicist could show me that would be like, oh, that's amazing. I now need to know your secrets.
Maybe he could take a magnet and some copper wire and make a light bulb glow.
That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't creative enough or didn't think about it long enough. There are totally things they could show me.
Also, finally, remember when we were reading Plane Crash?
Yes.
I think this is how Dathalon works.
I agree. I was going to say the same thing. And
okay.
I think that this, I don't know if there's a canonical explanation for why Dathalon doesn't have a history going back 100 years, but I think this is, if there is one, this is it. Is that I don't think it was some calamity or something. I think it was just on purpose. The idea is that it made everyone in Dathalon more scientifically curious. I wonder still, though, a lot of people today, their lives are too busy and they have other priorities. Like they even if it was inaccessible to them, they just wouldn't care to learn. And that's fine. Like, as long as the lights come on, I don't really care how they work. I can imagine that being a lot of people's default.
I mean, that's already a lot of people's default, right?
Well, yeah, but I think that what Yukowski's positing here is that if they were told you're not allowed to know why light bulbs work, that would make them more curious. And I think it would for some, but for others, they'd just be like, fuck it, as long as it still works.
Yeah, it'd be much more of a living in a demon-haunted world sort of feeling.
How do you mean?
I mean, like, right now, we flip on a light switch and we don't know how it works, the vast majority of us. I would be very hard-pressed to tell you all the details of it, right?
I couldn't make a light bulb for you. Yeah.
Right, yeah, no. I'm not sure I could explain all of it. Certainly the electricity part would be the hardest part for me to explain. But we know it's all mechanical. It's all physics. There's nothing spooky going around. In this sort of world, it'd be like, well, the cult of physicists knows, and they do some kind of physics magic to it, and like everything around you, from like your vacuum cleaner to your car, is like some other cult keeping mysterious secrets, and like is there spirits involved? They say no, but like we don't know what they're actually doing there. Like everything would feel much more mysterious and like things are just alive and unknowable around you.
Yeah, and I think to some people that would definitely spur them to be curious, and for others they just be fine with a non-explanation or no explanation.
I think those people might actually be happier too. Like the Keats type of people who don't want to know that the rainbow is refracted light. They'd be like, yeah, the world is magic. All the cults make things work with their culty magic, and I love it.
Do you think Keats would have been happier or more pissed if Newton said, I know how rainbows work, and me and all my friends know, but we're not telling you?
Definitely happier.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Huh. Because I don't think Keats knew how rainbows worked. He just knew that he could know.
Yeah.
I think it was just knowing that there was an answer.
I mean, knowing that it was just mundane stuff and not magic, I think was his issue. And the cults would make it, oh no, this is mysterious and spooky, and you got to do special rites and bathe in the blood of an ox before you can really know,
Yeah, maybe. I think maybe Keats would just be a hard guy to please, but maybe I'm modeling him incorrectly.
I mean, that makes the knowledge romantic, and Keats was just a classic romanticist.
That's true.
That's all he wanted, man.
Yeah. And I think the next post, if you're ready to move on.
Yes, let's.
Initiation ceremony. Is this the first kind of like little cutaway we get to the character Brennan and the Bayesian conspiracy? I
think this is the origin of the Bayesian conspiracy, yeah.
Nice. All right. We finally made it. It's been 7 and change years, and now here we are explaining where the name came from. There's not much to go through here. It's a hypothetical of him going through a learning rites ceremony, but there was one bit that I really liked where he's given some convoluted, it's just a paragraph. If 3/4 of the humans in this room are women, and 3/4 of the women and half of the men belong to the heresy of virtue, and I'm a virtuist, what is the probability that I'm a man? And Brennan says 2/11. And then there was silence, and then people started laughing. And then the guide says it's 1/6. Like there's this, it's done well and portrayed well in the story of Brennan kind of like, oh shit, I'm sweating, I'm freaking out. There's no way. And then someone's like, just say 1/6. And he's like, no, and he breaks down the math and he's also, I don't believe you. There's an odd number of people in this room. I loved that because that seems like a great last secret challenge of the trial. He went through everything else, but also you've got to pass the conformity test.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of just a fun thing to throw in there.
Oh yeah. It was great. It looked like classical Bayesian probability updating. And so then when at the end it says, you are now a novice of the Bayesian conspiracy, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it was literally Bayesian updating. This is great.
Yay.
Or I don't know if it's even updating, but it's you needed to be able to do that sort of Bayesian math to get it done. So that was fantastic.
I mean, it is updating with every new piece of information in the paragraph the guy gave him, right? But it also just, it seemed like kind of like the classic, Harry, James Potter, Evans, Vera's style of pointing out, like, also there's an odd number of people in this room. Not only are those numbers too neat, but there's no way you're right. So fuck you. not only is my math correct, but also you're wrong.
You know what's interesting? 10 years ago, I would have wanted to join this kind of thing and done the work to like be able to do this sort of math on the fly. Like I would have put in the hours. And now it's just like, I don't want to do the math. And like originally when I read this, I commented like, I am not smart enough to be a novice of the Bayesian conspiracy, which is kind of ironic. But like thinking more on it, like I am. I could put in the work and train myself because I know years ago I was right on the edge and just didn't do it because I had other things going on and there was no Bayesian conspiracy to join. So what's the point? But like now I'm at the point where I wouldn't do it. And I don't know if I've gotten lazier or what exactly has changed that I am no longer driven to join the Bayesian conspiracy if there is this... I think maybe it's because since the initiation rite requires this much math, I would have to... That's a sign that I have to find math already fun and engaging because that's mostly what we're going to be doing. And so I don't want to join the club just to join the club anymore. I want to join the club because that's what I want to do. And what they're doing isn't actually what I want to do right now.
Yeah, I read we talked about it a few weeks ago, the luck lottery that Scott Alexander mentioned. And I also share his lack of love for math. And it's nothing against math. And if before someone messages me and says, Steven, someone just hasn't explained it to you right, check out the short post. It's actually really short by Scott Alexander standards, or excuse me, the
Fascination Lottery.
Fascination Lottery. That's right, because he gives great analogies to every response people give him for, oh, you just need to have math explained right or whatever. Here's my trick: is I took that paragraph, plugged it into ChatGPT, and it showed me the math, and it came up with the same number as Brennan.
Oh, nice.
And so, like, I know it's kind of cheating because I did do the math in my head, but I did have the math performed, and I did follow the numbers, and was able to, like, watching it break it down for me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see what you did there, and you came to the right answer.
It's really weird because when I was 16, I was really into the math. I enjoyed the math, and now I don't anymore. And I don't know. I know I've said this before, but I feel like a different person, and the old me's from decades ago are dead now. And that is, that's kind of a shame. I sort of mourn them, and I don't know how they could have been kept alive.
Dead but not forgotten.
There we go. That's awesome.
Our interests change and our aptitudes adjust to new things that we find fun. I think that if you were the same person that you were 30 years ago, you'd be a very boring person.
Maybe.
The 46-year-old 16 or whatever, the 40-something 16-year-old in you would be probably happy to be around or whatever, but you'd be a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, you've had decades of growth. You wouldn't be able to have that if you stagnated.
I did just recently read that SSRIs seem to preserve brain plasticity, which is very interesting for me because, like, I'm thinking if I hadn't been on SSRIs my entire life, would I be much more the same kind of person I was 2-3 decades ago? And now that I'm weaning myself off them, does that mean I'm going to lock myself into this personality for the rest of my life? I don't know how I feel about this. I've on the one hand kind of loved changing and exploring new things all the time, and on the other hand, I do mourn for the dead Eneashes of the past, which is a weird thing to say.
You can always resurrect them whenever you want, though, in your mind, Like,
I can't, though.
I can. I mean, I guess I was going to say I can do that with me, but I honestly can barely remember who I was 2 weeks ago. So, like, I don't know. Yeah, the younger Stevens are gone, but they helped shape the current Steven, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah,
for whatever it's worth, if you're going to lock in at some point in your life, now seems like a good time because you seem, like in a happy, good spot,
I am in an incredibly happy point in my life. Yeah.
So
overall.
Yeah, if you're going to, lock in some traits, this seems like the prime time.
Yeah, but it's also less technical and less mathy of a person, and I've always found that those are just. This feels also weird to say, but it feels like technical and mathy are morally good in my opinion, which is weird, but like I feel like less of a good person because I'm less interested in those things.
I think we're just inculcated that way because of the circles we run in. And yes, like it makes me less impressive at less wrong meetups because I can't show math or whatever when I'm talking about stuff. But the thing is, I wouldn't have a shred of interest in math if it weren't for my friend circles. And it's only because of them that I make an effort to try to keep up at all. And so if it's not really for me, but just for like my social standing, that doesn't seem like a good reason. I mean, there's also just the fact, that we've got little God calculators in our pockets. And
right.
As long as you know what you're trying to do, the thing can do it for you. Maybe there's something fun about doing it by hand or whatever. But like, if all I want is the answer, then I can get that. It's just, I think you need to know enough math to know the kinds of things available to you.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing with programming, is just knowing the things in your tool belt. And that's why like learning any new language is a lot easier than learning your first. It's just like, how do I do this in this language?
Yeah. Well, there's one last thing in this, which I wanted to pull out just because I thought it was so freaking awesome and I loved it. Brennan, before he's let into the final secret room, is asked, do you want to know? And he says, yes, I want to know. And then the figure asks, know what exactly? And Brennan's like, oh shit, is this a test? Like, what's going on here? And sits and ponders on it for a while. And then ultimately the answer he comes back with is, it doesn't matter. The answer is still yes. Like, he just wants to know everything. And I was like, that is the coolest fucking answer in the world. And I love Brennan. And it was accepted by the secret figure.
It's a good answer. I would think that if you were at the end of your several year training through to become a level 8 physicist or something, that you would know the secrets that you want the answers to. Like I finally want to know the secret of the atom. I'm told that stuff is made of small stuff. I want to know what that stuff is. But yeah, his fully generic answer of just like, Yes, is a great answer, and I liked it too.
Well, we are now novices of the Bayesian conspiracy.
All right.
Now that we got to this post.
Took us a little while. You know who's been a novice for a while, though, and at least a novice?
Ooh, who's that?
Eogin is our patron for this episode.
Eogin, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. And it turns out people can become novices of the Bayesian conspiracy, not by learning crazy Bayesian math, but just by giving us $2 a month.
That's right.
Or $2 an episode. Is it $2 a month or $2 an episode?
One of us should know the answer to that, but I don't know. Patreon, I think, yeah, it depends on how we set it up. I think we do by episode.
Okay. That is, I guess, all to say. Eogin, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We love all the novices we have. And we ourselves are but novices. We're all going through this rationality thing together. And thank you for being here and supporting us, being with us along the journey.
Yes, well put. I have nothing to add other than another sincere thank you.
Oh, we forgot to say what we're reading next time for the posts.
Oh, no, we didn't, because it's not too late.
Aha! For next time, we will be reading the Less Wrong posts, Hand versus Fingers, and Angry Atoms.
Oh, I think I remember the first one. This is fun. Now we're digging into reductionism.
Oh yeah!
All right, cool, awesome, love it.
All right, well, thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you again in 2 weeks.
Sounds great. See ya.
Okay, bye.